Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up to, and our general impressions. Wait. Did I say everything there? I feel like I probably missed some things.
Yeah.
I'm Trevor Starkey. Dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. There, yeah, that's fine.
No, you know that.
It's whatever. It's gonna be a loose night. Today we're gonna be talking about Spider-Man: Homecoming, the first of the Tom Holland Spider-Man films. As we continue our November Marvel month here. If you did not catch it, you can go catch Cameron and my thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and the Loki Season 2 the last couple weeks. We're gonna wrap up, kind of returning to our Spider-Man series that we've been doing for a good chunk of this year here with Spider-Man: Homecoming. Joining me, we have Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
Fantastic.
Excellent. And Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cam?
Hey, what's going on?
What's going on? A fun kind of cross section of a couple of our themes that we've been doing recently. We'll be doing this week. We'll be doing Far From Home next week, which will be basically our post-Thanksgiving episode. We're gonna spoiler peek behind the curtain. We're gonna record it ahead of time, but we'll have that for audiences that week. We'll be having kind of a nice little wrap up of the available Spider-Man things. Unless you guys want to dive down the Venom hole, and I think Morbius is also on Disney Plus.
Never seen Venom either.
Yeah. I'm just going to put this out here.
Yeah.
Eat shit and die.
Yeah, no, I'm good never touching those. So we'll just come back to this whenever we eventually get No Way Home.
I'm sorry for dropping such a heavy cuss bomb at the beginning of the episode, but
it's
under no circumstances am I watching anything Venom or Morbius related.
That's about on track for Cameron first.
Yeah.
So
Spider-Man: Homecoming here, originally released July 7th, 2017. And before I guess I do the more of the rigmarole, especially since we've done so much Spider-Man stuff in recent months, where you guys fall on the Tom Holland Spider-Man stuff? I know, but to bring up the audience up to speed, where do you guys fall on Tom Holland? Logan, how about you first?
I like Tom Holland a lot as a human being. And it's important to preface that, I think, because I feel like these conversations get so heated so quickly about people's favorite spider people.
I mean, certain people will get these things very heated. I'm not going to be like, oh my God, you're completely wrong.
Like,
Cameron
obviously, we've talked before the fact that obviously I love Tobey Maguire, right? Like, I mean, part of that is just like I grew up with Tobey Maguire, as we all did, right? And I think the Sam Raimi movies really work for me, apart from 3. And I think Spider-Man 2 is like a perfect superhero movie almost. And I just think there's like an element of that is who I always envisioned Peter Parker to look like and to act like in a lot of ways, and they're very evocative of like the 60s era Peter Parkers that I think of from like the TV series or the comics. And then Andrew Garfield is just, I mean, I think we're all big Andrew Garfield fans. I know me and Trevor are. And so he's got a certain charm, but it's just kind of surrounded by so much
bad
trash. Right. Yeah. And Tom Holland's this weird one where he's not really what I ever envisioned Peter to be like. They do, I think, a pretty different spin on Peter Parker in Tom Holland's movies, which is not necessarily bad at all. I just think it doesn't work as well for me. And I me and Trevor have talked for like 7 years about Tom Holland. And how I think a lot of his Peter moments, Spider-Man moments don't really work or land for me. And I stand by a lot of those criticisms, and I think some of them I maybe step away from now. But it's not, I think No Way Home is his best movie pretty easily. I think Far From Home,
you haven't seen. Yeah.
And Homecoming I enjoy, but it doesn't feel very Spider-Man to me. And I think part of this is just like the MCUification of his movies. But to go to one of my favorite things, right? Like, I think, just as I always say that there is like a era of Star Wars for everyone, I think there's a Spider-Man for everyone, and I recognize that Tom Holland is incredibly popular as Spider-Man. So that's what I'd say.
Cool. How about you, Cam? Where do you fall in the Tom Holland weigh in on Spider-Man?
I've contested for years, ever since Homecoming came out, and I maintain this belief, and I found many others who also feel the same way about me, and I believe it's now the kind of what is now, I believe, now typically considered the mainstream opinion, and that is that I love Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker. I love the dopey, doe-eyed 1960s, 1950s Spider-Man or Peter Parker. His not being able to turn that off when he puts on the mask has always felt like a detriment to his performance as Spider-Man. Despite, I think, his films being top to bottom, like some of the best, Spider-Man 2 is an all but perfect film. And it's certainly the perfect archetype of the traditional superhero film that is not an origin story. That being said, and then I've also found that, rewatching Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man series, definitely had my, came around a lot on the first Amazing Spider-Man. Definitely continued my hatred for the second one. But I still contest that, some of the best in costume Spider-Man moments belong to James Garfield.
Andrew Garfield.
Sorry. James Garfield is somebody else.
That's a president. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a president.
20th president. 1881.
All right. Yep. Andrew Garfield is some of the best in costume Spider-Man stuff that we've ever seen. Tom Holland, I maintain, is the balance between the two. He is the smart, slightly confident, but still super dorky Peter Parker. And he has some really fun, awesome, incredibly cool moments where when he puts on the mask, he does maintain a different confidence. And this film, of course, establishes the idea of who are you without the technology? Who are you without the suit? Are you still Spider-Man? Because this is, of course, we got introduced to him as Spider-Man, not in an origin story.
Yeah, but we got him basically a year before this as his little cameo in Civil War.
Yeah.
That made much news even years before that.
Yeah. So when it comes to all of that, it is a matter of this is a very different storytelling for a Spider-Man, because Spider-Man is not isolated as the only hero, even in New York. And it is telling a very different side of a Peter Parker Spider-Man story that I don't think has had any opportunities to really be told in the way of what happens when Spider-Man pops up in a universe that already has superheroes. That's usually not an approach that's ever really taken outside. I believe the one of the Spider-Man cartoons took on that aspect of it, but it was in the post MCU era. All of that being said, I like Tom Holland a lot as Spider-Man. I think that he's great. I have rewatching it after No Way Home. In the kind of this is my first time watching it since No Way Home. And a lot of my previous contextualization of things that I really loved about this movie no longer apply. Because of certain distinct revelations that we kind of get out of No Way Home. And so there's certain reconciliations I had to make about it that have no bearing or impact on the film itself. The film itself is still to me a really great film, but my appreciation of my personal interpretation of certain aspects of this film no longer apply. And we'll go into this a little bit here in a little bit later, but for right now, I will say still absolutely stellar film. I really, really love the Tom Holland MCU Spider-Man verse, but I also understand why it's not some people's favorites, because it is the only part of the Spider-Man saga, film sagas, that is not intrinsically all about just Spider-Man. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I obviously I'm long on record at this point of Spider-Verse obviously being the superior of anything, but
Absolutely,
of the
without a
live
doubt.
action stuff,
I stand
obviously,
by that. I
yeah,
stand by
yeah.
that too.
I
Of the
don't,
live
but
action stuff, I've also long said like I liked the Raimi and Tobey Maguire stuff like as it was coming out because it was what we had, and you know it was a like we didn't know better, we didn't have better age of like Spider-Man and X-Men, kind of like the 1-2 punch there of the early aughts. Um, and then we do get the MCU and this like interconnected story, and it does start kind of like begging for more. And so by the time we get like the Andrew Garfield stuff that tries to do that and rush it too quickly, it flounders a lot. But I like Andrew Garfield better than I like Tobey Maguire, is kind of like where I landed on that. And then when Tom Holland came around and was like, you know, officially kind of inserted into this larger storytelling and still gets to have his own stories, but they are, you know, they do have other tent poles that they're playing around with. It very much, it has been like the best of both worlds. Like I like the Spider-Man stories of the Raimi trilogy, even if there's a whole bunch of stuff in those I don't like, including a lot of Tobey Maguire's choices and stuff. And then I don't like the stories, but I like the Spider-Man of the Amazing Spider-Man stuff. And then we get to Holland Spider-Man, and I like this Spider-Man, and I like the stories that he gets. And in particular, I think, and this one is like both this and Far From Home are going for very specific vibes in their storytelling. This one is very much going for like a John Hughes kind of like let's do a, you know, teen kind of story. Far From Home is going to go very much into like the European vacation vibe and road trip kind of stuff. And so I think those like help make it like it's not just a Spider-Man thing, it's a Spider-Man and a thing. So yeah, that's where I end up kind of falling personally. And yeah, this is probably the first time I've rewatched this as well since No Way Home. So it was definitely an interesting revisit. Like I'll say in particular, given where like Spider-Man has ended up, I kind of forgot him being as insecure about some of his stuff and as kind of needy and like, you know, just that like string of texts to Happy Hogan and stuff. Like
Yeah.
I'd completely forgotten about like those parts of his early arc here, kind of coming back from Germany after the events of Civil War and stuff like that, and like how he was put on the bench, and that's where we find him in this movie, kind of thing.
Yeah. Also, where you get to see a very different, like the turn that Happy and Peter's relationship take at the end of this movie, and then further on throughout the three movies, is transformative in comparison to where they start off with.
Yeah.
And it's quite great. I think that it was a fun way to revisit Peter as an annoying little bug in Happy Hogan's radar to all of a sudden this kid being one of the most important people in Happy's life. It's quite great.
Yep.
I think Cameron, I think, has an interesting point too with the MCification of the Tom Holland movies, which is something that I don't like, but is not my big issue with the Tom Holland movies, which we'll get more into later on. But to me, I think the interconnected nature of all the superheroes that exist around here is, I mean, I've I've been on the record for my entire life saying those are not the superhero stories that I enjoy, right? I like when they start kind of mashing other characters together is sort of when it like cracks my like the barrier between being immersed and like watching something and like feeling like I'm not able to kind of take part in it fully. And so that is something that I don't appreciate, but I actually don't think it's a huge issue in this movie because I think it's done in a like with a deft enough touch that it works really seamlessly. And I think part of that is because Tony is Tony in this movie and not really Iron Man, which I think is also something to be said for the, like a larger conversation around like the fact that I've been very vocal with the fact that I think the MCU really ruined Tony Stark as a character after Iron Man 3, and I've been very vocal about this for a lot of times. I think Iron Man 3 is so clearly like a perfect ending for him, and then they just basically like washed away all of his character's progress. And so it was cool to see him in this. Cameron's wrong, but it's cool to see.
I'm not wrong. I am certainly not wrong about this. You are certainly in the minority, and that's fine.
I am.
You're in the minority. Nobody's wrong because we're talking about opinions. Nobody's wrong about anything.
I'm in the minority for Iron Man 3 in general. It feels like, which is such an underappreciated.
I love Iron Man 3, so that's not the case.
It's such a good movie, but some people will hate it because of the twist. But
that's fine.
Yeah, the Mandarin twist is great too. Also, people can get over that.
Absolutely,
but,
Trevor Slattery.
Yeah, it's great.
It's so good.
It's
so
great.
Good.
Yeah, the entire like it makes sense. It works great, and people just should accept it and be a cool.
Exactly,
especially after what we got in Shang-Chi.
Hey, maybe it's Iron Man 3 is a Christmas movie. Maybe we'll throw that into our.
Oh, hey, that's fun. Let's do that. That sounds awesome.
That's true. I would absolutely do that. Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
I don't even think I've seen Iron Man 3 since before Endgame.
I love the Iron Man trilogy so much. I would be super down for that. And
I've been on the record as saying I'd be curious to know what you think, Cam, and Trevor to a lesser degree. Like, part of me thinks that Iron Man 2 is like slightly underappreciated a little bit. Like, it's not great by any means, but like it's better than people give it credit for, I think.
You have to love bits to the level and extent that I do.
Yeah,
to enjoy Iron Man 2 on the level that I enjoy Iron Man 2.
I don't love it, but it's not terrible.
Iron Man 2 has some of the best bits in the Iron Man films.
I agree.
However, bits don't make a good movie.
Yeah, it's very messy, but it's like better than people think it is.
Yeah, to me it is such a like an interesting like time capsule of that era. Like and largely that's coming from the Mickey Rourkeness of it.
The Mickey Rourkeness, the Sam, what's his name? Who plays
he's one of
Sam Rockwell.
Sam,
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't think he's of his time as much as Mickey Rourke is. Like that was very much
for
like,
sure.
Hey, Mickey Rourke just like hit really big in the wrestler, so let's get him in, and he's gonna do this weird thick Russian thing and talk about a bird a lot. We have not done Iron Man 3 as a That D Plus show. We did have it as a That Wannabe film class back in January 2020, and I believe I joined our friends over at the Castle Vault podcast and did when they were doing the MCU. I think I joined them for Iron Man 3. I think I requested to join them for Iron Man 3, so I probably watched it.
A good movie.
Somewhat recently, but yeah, I watched it recently enough to be like, did we do That D Plus show on it at some point? But no. All right. Well, we'll talk more about the film, obviously, here. But let's dive back into some of the other bits and segments. Speaking of bits, so other releases of the time that we had back here. Again, July 7th, 2017 is when this one came out, and 2017, wild year. So the summer kicked off in May 5th, 2017, with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2,
my favorite Guardian of the Galaxy movie.
And a couple weeks later, we had Alien Covenant, the latest Alien film from Ridley Scott.
Not my favorite Alien movie.
Yeah, no. Nope. We had the last entry in one of our other recent series here, Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Men Tell No Tales, hit May 26th of that year.
Disgusting, deserves to have been forgotten forever.
Sure. Just pointing that out when we get to like the box office thing to remember, hey, we have looked at this year before. But we did have we had Wonder Woman finally make her way onto the DC stage on June 2nd, which is also like what probably a lot of us saw in Kind of Funny Live that year. The Mummy a week later with Tom Cruise, the ill-fated Dark Universe, there June 9th. Cars 3 and the Book of Henry, June 16th. And I highlight the Book of Henry here because that is arguably the failing of Colin Trevorrow's directorial performance in that took him off of Episode 9 for Star Wars. Basically, they're like, "Oh, this was bad. We don't want him to do a Star Wars anymore," which obviously then bounced back to J.J. Abrams.
That he could have done anything he wanted, and it would have been better.
Yeah,
literally anything.
I've read the leaked part of his scripts. It was moderately okay.
Yes, which would have been infinitely better than what we actually got in Episode 9.
It did nothing to address any of the things in the second film, which is okay because the second film didn't do anything to address the things of the first film.
Yeah.
We have Transformers: The Last Night on June 21st. We have The Big Sick June 23rd, which I want to shout out because A, great movie, but B, that episode of that wannabe film class, one of our highest viewed ever because people like click it thinking they're going to get the actual movie and then it's a podcast.
That's
and
also back in the day
when we were at PAX East in 2020, right before the pandemic. I got while we were there, I got a flag on our YouTube from Amazon flagging like
That's
a copyright.
Right. It was a strike. We got struck, right?
No, it wasn't a strike.
Okay.
It was just like they made a copyright claim. I'm like, like we're using your promotional image as the thumbnail. That's it. Or I guess it was probably also the image across the entire episode because we didn't do video back then.
Yeah,
but it was basically just that thumbnail throughout the entire thing. And so but it was just like the YouTube's automations caught it and I was like, this is for use. We're fine. It got overturned pretty quickly. But yeah, it's shout out to The Big Sick. Baby Driver, my favorite film of that year because I hadn't seen Lady Bird at the time, was June 28th. Of course, that also has way more problems now.
I never got to see it. A lot of
problems with the Baby Driver. Trevor, I saw it with Trevor.
You watched it, yeah. You came and watched it at my house.
Yeah.
With Trevor.
I've never seen it. It's the only Edgar Wright film I've never seen.
And it almost literally broke my brain. Trevor can attest this. I thought the entire second half
a very different direction.
I thought it was going to go a very different way, and then when it didn't, for like an hour in the back of that movie, I was like, is this all a dream sequence? For so long, kept being like, it's going on really long for a dream sequence, and it just wasn't. It was the rest of the movie that was so fundamentally different than what I could have ever imagined.
In the Minions verse side of things, we had Despicable Me 3, June 30th over there.
Oh, that's the one with the twins. Yeah, I've seen that one.
Sure.
My nieces and nephew loved it.
Finally, here we have July 7th, Spider-Man Homecoming. A week later, we have War of the Planet of the Apes. And having just seen a trailer for whatever the next Planet of the Apes film is, I'm like, they're still making those. They didn't stop at the trilogy. Okay.
The trilogy is like phenomenal.
Dunkirk on the Christopher Nolan side of things.
One of my
July 21st.
All-time favorite movies. It's a masterpiece.
I've never seen it because I didn't see it in theaters, and I heard it's kind of like it's okay if you don't see it in theaters. It's only really good if you have
really, really great if you don't see it. That movie is like, I think a movie just from like a technical perspective is incredible.
July 28th was the Emoji Movie, and one of the actual good movies I remember enjoying that I probably would not have seen had I not had Movie Pass during this era, Atomic Blonde, which is basically like a Charlize Theron like Bourne kind of film.
Blonde is a really okay movie, but it has what is still what is 2017, so 6 years removed, one of the single greatest one take fight sequences I've ever seen a movie ever do. It's it's like a 10-minute unbroken scene like in like a abandoned building on one take, and it's absolutely incredible. It's John Wick like 4 caliber like choreography there. It's great.
The Dark Tower was August 4th. And then August 18th, The Hitman's Bodyguard and Logan Lucky. It, which would then become It Chapter 1.
I was going to say,
September 8th. So with a whole bunch of that stuff.
Logan Lucky was 6 years
this
ago.
This movie, Spider-Man Homecoming, domestic, brought in $334.2 million in 2017, which was up from the $202.9 million of Amazing Spider-Man 2. So where do you guys think that fell in our top domestic grosses of 2017?
So the important thing to remember is Trevor is trying to trick us here because there was a Star Wars movie in 2017.
Yes.
I'll give you a spoiler that there are a lot of big winter releases that are not listed in the rundown we just did.
So when did Force Awakens come out? Was that 2015? Awakens?
I'll tell you, this was Last Jedi's year.
Okay, thank you.
Force Awakens was 2015.
15, yeah. There wasn't a James Bond movie though, because this was 2017. So Skyfall or Spectre already happened, but we weren't at No Time to Die yet, so that's off the table. So we had Star Wars. There's no like Avatar related thing in this time period. What other MCU movies were coming out in 2017? And you said it made how much? 332.
We did have MCU movies that year. I'll give you. We had Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 kicked off that year, and then you may remember that we probably all saw Thor Ragnarok together at Extra Life that year.
Oh yeah, that's the key one. Okay, I feel comfortable saying this was 6 domestically.
Okay. How about you, Cam?
I'm gonna say 4.
All right.
Ooh, okay.
Number 10, Justice League with 229 million.
Oh, Justice League we didn't even talk about.
Just outside Logan, from earlier that year, 226 million.
What a phenomenal movie.
Number 9, Despicable Me 3, 264 million. Number 8, Thor Ragnarok with 315 million.
Okay.
Number 7, It, 327 million.
It did. Wow, it did way better than that.
Number 6, bang on the money for Logan, Spider-Man Homecoming, 334 million. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, just ahead of it, 389 million. I say just ahead of it, $50 million ahead of it. Because, that was still a juggernaut. Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle was number 4.
Oh, that movie did.
That was a late release, but then it had legs into
the first
2018.
one, right?
That was the first one. That was that was the first.
That movie's
reboot
good. That movie's fun
with The Rock. And then like The Next Level or whatever would be the next one. Both of them like came out late in the year and basically had no competition for like January and February, so they basically just stayed.
And that first Jumanji movie is actually legitimately really good.
That's what I'm saying. It's good. Yeah.
Wonder Woman was number 3 with 412.5 million. Beauty and the Beast is the other big major one that came out that holiday season.
Still never seen it.
504 million.
404 million.
And then Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, 620 million domestic. Well ahead of the pack. It was number 6 domestically. Worldwide gross, we had an $880.2 million gross, which was not down. It was up from Amazing Spider-Man 2's $708.9 million. So where do you guys think 880 lands in the worldwide box office there in 2017?
Star Wars is still going to be high. Beauty and the Beast is still going to be high. Jumanji's a weird one. I don't know how well I think that'll do international or not.
It has The Rock attached to it. I think it's going to do pretty well. But I think Spider-Man Homecoming maybe jumps up to number 4.
Okay.
I'm gonna stick with 6. I don't know if I think it'll pass anything that was ahead of it. Maybe Guardians is the only thing I could see, but I'm gonna stick with 6.
Okay. Wonder Woman drops down to our number 10 spot.
Ooh, wow, here, from 3
internationally, worldwide. Thor Ragnarok slips just a little bit to number 9, 853 million. Wolf Warrior 2, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is our number 8. It drops down to number 8 with 863 million. Wolf Warrior 2 is a Chinese only release, but it had $870 million in China. So it was number 7. Spider-Man
I've seen parts of that movie on TikTok.
There you go. Spider-Man Homecoming was number 6. It stayed at number 6.
There you go. Okay.
This
double win.
This time with 880 million. Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, number 5. Despicable Me jumps up to number 4.
Oh crap! I forgot about the European audience for Despicable Me. That's huge over there.
Cracking $1 billion. Our top 4 are $1 billion. Jumanji just out of the $1 billion club with 962 million. Despicable Me 1.034 billion. The Fate of the Furious, which didn't even crack the top 10 domestically in here at
worldwide. Yeah, those movies are enormous overseas.
They were like, this is pretty much, I think, the pinnacle that they
is.
At 1.2 because the last couple have not.
This is like
as well.
Furious 7 and this one were huge.
1.26 billion was Beauty and the Beast, and 1.33 billion was Last Jedi. There we go. Our runtime here, 2 hours 13 minutes. In our because we're now in two timelines for these movies. I have our Sony Spider-Man timeline, which was Amazing Spider-Man 2, had been May of 2014, then Homecoming, July 2017, and the next we'll get is Into the Spider-Verse in December of 2018, before Far From Home, July 2019. But we are also in the MCU timeline now. So we did have Captain America Civil War was, of course, Spider-Man's first appearance in the MCU a year ago, May 2016 at this point. Then we had Doctor Strange November of that year, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 in May of 2017, Spider-Man Homecoming July 2017, and Thor Ragnarok winding down that year, November 2017. Then 2018 would bring us Black Panther in February and Avengers Infinity War the following April. All right. Our cast of characters, our who's who, our roll call here. John Watts is our director here. Prior to this, he had done a number of Fat Boy Slim music videos. Not the notable Christopher Walken one, if that's the one you're thinking of, because that's the one I was thinking of. He also directed a number of segments.
That's weapon of choice, by the way.
I know, yeah. He also did a number of segments for The Onion, their like film side of things. And then prior to this, like on the directorial, like full length side of things, he did a couple projects called Clown and Cop Car, which he, spoiler, also kind of was the writer for. And then, yeah, Spider-Man Homecoming was his big kind of like going from an indie guy to big blockbuster stuff. He did Spider-Man Homecoming, Far From Home, and No Way Home. He is one of the few that has done the full trilogy of his respective superhero, alongside now Peyton Reed for the Ant-Man films. Obviously, we also have the Edgar Wright thing from the first Ant-Man, and James Gunn, of course, for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Our writers here, 6 writers on this one. We had 3 pairs of teams, basically. Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daly are credited for the screenplay and the screen story, having worked on films like Horrible Bosses 1 and 2, The Incredible Burt Wonderstone, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2, Vacation, Spider-Man Homecoming here, and then most recently this year, they did Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves and The Flash. So, a mixed bag of a year for them. Our duo of John Watts and Christopher Ford wrote Clown and Cop Car prior to this. Then they also wrote Spider-Man Homecoming here, and they are the creative team behind the upcoming Disney Plus Star Wars show Skeleton Crew, which I believe is the one starring Jude Law as some sort of something. And I think maybe he has like refugees that he's helping. I don't remember what the plot line of that one is, but it's a future Disney Plus Star Wars show that's coming out. And then Chris McKenna and Eric Summers are the third writing team that came in on this one, having written a number of episodes of American Dad and Community. That's certainly where I first remember hearing Chris McKenna's name. They also wrote the Lego Batman movie, Spider-Man Homecoming, Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle, so they had a very good year. Mm-hmm. Ant-Man and the Wasp, Spider-Man Far From Home, and Spider-Man No Way Home, so they'll be back for the next couple. And the film Ghosted, which was the Netflix one, maybe? Or maybe Apple TV Plus. I don't know. It was one of the Chris Evans and Ana de Armas ones from earlier this year. Our cast of characters, of course, we have Tom Holland here as Peter Parker / Spider-Man, having played that role since Civil War. Other films of his include Spies in Disguise, Dolittle, Onward, and Uncharted. Michael Keaton, of course, as Adrian Toomes, and aka The Vulture, having been in stuff like Beetlejuice, Batman and Batman Returns. He steals the show as Dogberry in the 1993 Much Ado About Nothing, which I threw in here just for you, Logan, as I know you love it. Toy Story 3, where he plays Ken. So he got his turn in the Knuff spotlight. Of course, he was also in Birdman, the film Spotlight, the film The Founder, yes. Spider-Man Homecoming here. Yep. And then more recently, he was in the Hulu series Dope Sick,
that's right,
Morbius, and The Flash, and the eponymously shelved Batgirl. So,
he's really
he's incredible.
Good in Much Ado About Nothing. I mean, he's good. He's great and everything, but among a very talented cast, Much Ado About Nothing, he's really fun.
Steals the show as the role of Dogberry.
Yeah.
Robert Downey Jr. Making yet another appearance here as Tony Stark in Iron Man, having been Iron Man since 2008. Has also been in stuff like Sherlock Holmes, Dolittle, and most recently Oppenheimer.
Since it's not on the list, I will also say I think it's just called Chaplin. He plays Charlie Chaplin, and he's incredible in that.
That was like one of his like early super breakout great roles. Marissa Tomei in here as May Parker, having been famously in My Cousin Vinny.
Yep.
Hell yeah.
As well as The Wrestler, The Big Short, and here the Spider-Man films. Jon Favreau returning as Happy Hogan, having played him since Iron Man. Also been in Swingers, Chef, and these days he is a director, writer, producer for a number of Disney and Star Wars projects, including a lot of their like live action animated like Jungle Book and Lion King stuff, and then obviously a lot of the Mandalorian stuff. Gwyneth Paltrow in here at like 6th billing for her 2 lines at the end of the film or whatever, as Pepper Potts, having been Pepper Potts since Iron Man. Prior to that, she'd been in stuff like Emma and Shakespeare in Love and The Royal Tenenbaums and Shallow Hal. Zendaya here as Michelle. Prior to this, she'd been in Shake It Up and Casey Undercover and Zapped, a Disney Channel original movie. It's kind of her gateway into superstardom. Then she would go on here in the Spider-Man films. She's also been in The Greatest Showman. Smallfoot, which I call out just for the Zendaya is Michi meme that we got, a couple years back. She was Lola Bunny in Space Jam: A New Legacy, which I did not remember or realize maybe. And then she's been in Dune, and of course she's done many accolades in Euphoria. Donald Glover in here as Aaron Davis, having been in Community and Atlanta. He's in here, of course, in Homecoming. He's also Lando in Solo: A Star Wars Story, Simba in The Lion King, and he got to play the Prowler in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Spoilers, since I think you maybe have not seen that yet, Logan. He has a little cameo there. Laura Harrier is Liz. She kind of came up in the soap world in One Life to Live. She's also in The Last 5 Years, which I call out because Cameron and I saw that the play. She plays manuscript girl is what her credit is. So I imagine she's the girl that is like flirting with Jamie during his song about, I'm showing her my manuscript. Will you look at my manuscript?
Yes.
I'm showing her my left hand, gesticulating with my left hand, and then whoop, there's Kathy. Anyway, I know that show way too well. She's also been in addition to Homecoming here, she was in Black Klansman after this, and she was in this year's White Men Can't Jump. Tony Revolori gets the last of our main core credits here as Flash. Having been in the Grand Budapest Hotel prior to this. He's also a Wes Anderson regular since then. He's also in the film Dope, the Spider-Man films here, and he was in the ill-fated Willow that is no longer on Disney+.
Which is a shame because he's really good in it.
And we got a bevy of kind of little cameo or small bit things here, including Bokeem Woodbine, who is our Shocker number 2 / Herman Schultz. You can also see him in Ghostbusters Afterlife, as well as a number of other things. Tyne Daly, Annie Marie Hogue here, shouting her out. She is the damage control lady that we get kind of a couple times in the movie, but she is the eponymous Lacey of Cagney and Lacey. Hannibal Buress here is Coach Wilson, of course, stand-up and the Eric Andre Show. Kenneth Choi as Principal Rita, having previously been in Captain America: The First Avenger, as well as the series The Last Man on Earth, which I very much enjoyed. Salinas Leyva as Miss Warren here, probably best known to audiences from Orange is the New Black. Martin Starr as Mr. Harrington, having been in Freaks and Geeks, Party Down, and Silicon Valley. Michael Chernus as Phineas Mason / The Tinkerer, also from Orange is the New Black, and more recently Severance. Michael Mando as Mac Gargan, notoriously Voss from Far Cry 3, and more recently Better Call Saul. Jennifer Connelly as Karen, the Suit Lady, of course, Labyrinth and Requiem for a Dream, and of Marvel note, she was in Ang Lee's Hulk. Tiffany Espenson as Cindy, aka Cindy Moon, aka Silk, who I will shout out here, given her role in the comics and whatnot. She was in, I think, a Nickelodeon show. Yeah. Bucket and Skinner's Epic Adventures. And then Chris Evans here as, of course, Steve Rogers, Captain America, having been that role since Captain America, the First Avenger. And he's also been in Knives Out, Lightyear, The Gray Man, and, as I mentioned earlier, Ghosted. We have our Stan Watch, and sadly, this will be our last Stan Watch of this run, as he will not be in Far From Home next week. But Stan Lee's cameo, anybody remember who he is in this one?
Cameron?
Not comic book shop.
I have no idea.
He's a guy called Gary. When Spider-Man is attacking the carjacker, thinking he's a carjacker, and then all the neighbors kind of scream out and like, yeah, you're making too much noise. He's one of the people that pokes his head out the window.
Oh, okay.
And a lady across the way is like, Gary, how you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm good, Carol. How are you? Or whatever he says. I don't know. How are the kids? I think is what he says. So yeah, we'll pop up from him there. As Gary. I still have it in our doc, but I don't think any more of them have an all out of bubblegum body count like the Raimi ones did. Although we do get a couple deaths in this one. On the awards front, this won a Kids' Choice Award for Zendaya as favorite movie actress and a nomination for favorite movie, and it won a Teen Choice Award for Choice Summer Movie, as well as awards for Choice Summer Movie Star, male and female, with Tom Holland and Zendaya. Other trivia, Kenneth Choi, who I mentioned as Principal Morita, also played Howling Commando Jim Morita in Captain America, the First Avenger. So when Peter is in the principal's office, you can see a photo of his Howling Commando self as a nod that this character is a great-grandson or something of his Howling Commando character.
Grandson specifically, yes.
Grandson, yeah. Aaron Davis mentions he has a nephew. Of course, this is a nod to Miles Morales in The Neighborhood and Aaron Davis's role here as the Prowler. Additionally, I will highlight here one of his aliases in the film is Brian Pinchetti, which is supposed to be a reference to Brian Michael Bendis and Sarah Pachetti, his co-creators, or Sarah Pacelli, sorry. They also, they say Pincelli in the thing instead of Picelli. There's no N in her name, so it's a weird, I don't know if they did a typo in that nod, but it's definitely a nod to that. Jennifer Connelly voices the computer Karen, while her husband, Paul Bettany, has voiced Jarvis for many, many years. So that's a fun little tie-in to those two. In Peter's school, we get pictures of Howard Stark, Abraham Erskine from Captain America, and Bruce Banner on the murals across the walls. I, of course, had to call this out, being the Lego super nerd. At one point, Ned calls out that the Lego Death Star set he has 3,803 pieces. That was set 75159, launched in October of 2016. So it is at least time accurate to when this takes place, but it did have 4,016 pieces. So take that. And I'm very disappointed that is not actually listed as a goof on IMDb's page. I'm not going to bother ever creating an account for myself, but it definitely seemed like some other Lego nerd would have called that out. But no, alas, it's just me. The book, Marvel Studios, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, an official timeline, has come out this year and quote unquote retcons the fact that we get an 8 years later reference at the beginning of this film. Because obviously the top of this film takes place, the Battle of New York, famously in 2012, when the Avengers film came out, and then it says 8 years later, which would put us in 2020. But no, this film is taking place in 2016, so it should have only been 4 years later. In world logic is probably like, oh, well, they didn't want it to be like a 12-year-old daughter drawing a crayon drawing of the Avengers or something, so they had to let's age her down and let's say 8 years later. But the book basically has now a little footnote in that saying, because also Vulture says 8 years and not a word from the feds. So the book calls us out with a note from Miss Minutes from Loki. Red line alert. Hi again. Adrian Toombs says the Battle of New York was 8 years ago, but that event was only 4 years prior. This one's a real head scratcher for us. I reckon an analyst misplaced the case file. So they've turned it into a TVA goof as kind of how they're retconning it. But yeah, just wanted to call that out because it's one of those that, like, when it came up in the film, years ago, I was like, but why would you break your own timeline? They very clearly established timeline at this point. Why would you do that? Whatever. Anyway.
Almost.
That's it.
Like continuity is dumb, and we should all just get, again, as someone who's a James Bond and Star Wars fan, just embrace it. Just enjoy the movie, guys. You know what I mean?
At least they never came out and were like, officially, yes, that was little Tom Holland, little Peter Parker at the expo with the Iron Man thing in Iron Man 2. They never came out like that was a fan theory that was running for a long time. Like, oh, how cool would that be? And they were like, no. We're not going to do that. We've already broken the timeline enough. Anyway, so that's the trivia I've got. Obviously, we talked a little bit about the movie already, but I will throw it to you, Cam. Where do you want to take it? How does the movie hold up here now that we are almost 8 years later now?
So this is where I'm going to take a moment to talk about a prevailing fan theory that I was championing for a very, very long time, and how it was, fine. Like, it's fine that they did this. I feel like it takes away some, panache from this film, and that is my theory for a very long time, in which that Uncle Ben did exist in this franchise, and that his death was something that Aunt May and Peter danced around a lot in this film.
That's not at all a theory. That's what happens in this film.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and I might be a combination of being tired and me also not bringing this up, because I really felt like this was a strong point for the film for a long time. But what didn't they basically confirm in No Way Home that he doesn't have an Uncle Ben?
No,
I don't think so.
No. I mean, I don't know what you're
remember,
referencing.
certainly.
No, and in fact, since I've already put it together for the trivia for next week's episode, the luggage that Peter takes on his European vacation specifically has like BFP for Benjamin Franklin Parker on it. So he is taking Uncle Ben's suitcase in the next movie.
Cool. Okay.
So yeah, no, it's very much, like, I mean, even going back to Civil War, like, it's alluded to that Uncle Ben's already died. Peter's already kind of, like, he doesn't say the with great responsibility. Obviously, we're going to get that in No Way Home eventually from May. Spoilers for that movie, I guess. But yeah, no, in that he said in his scene in Civil War, it's very much something like, when you have the powers I have, you got to do something with it.
Yeah, because otherwise good people get hurt.
Exactly, yeah.
And so, some of them even die. Yeah.
This movie very much has like...
Yeah, you're spot on.
I can't do that to May, not after everything that's, she's lost, everything that's already happened.
Because I've always felt like her freaking out at him for not calling her after the boat thing was very much we've already been through this where we didn't take somebody not calling home seriously.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
so
that's very much like Uncle Ben, while never seen in this trilogy of films, is very much a presence. Yeah,
okay,
he
cool.
did exist.
I thought that got that was pseudo washed out I guess it's just he is not the one who said with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, he doesn't say that. And then I don't obviously the end of No Way Home, again, spoilers for that movie, there isn't, or at least we don't linger on or see a grave for Ben Parker, when maybe we should.
And hers doesn't say anything about her being a wife either.
Yeah, maybe not. I don't know.
That was one of the things for me. I was like, oh, okay, so Ben Parker doesn't exist. But now I'm wondering, maybe it's when he got erased. Did they oh wow. No, because it still says her last name's Parker, right? On her gravestone?
I mean, yeah. So yeah, she would have existed. It would make more sense if it doesn't say she was an aunt, beloved aunt,
right?
Given the events of that film, but yeah, I don't recall that being I don't even remember seeing that as oh my God, can you believe they wrote Uncle Ben out of existence or something like that?
I thought they did. Okay, never mind. I take it back then. Never mind. They mastered. Then I will go ahead and put back in here my prevailing theory. They masterfully handled Uncle Ben as a character. I've often called him the ghost character of this film.
Yeah. So the thing I'll highlight, they don't have any kind of like beloved wife or anything. It's they have, when you help someone, you help everyone. Very much a quote attributed to her in the comics
That is
and
true.
like the video
Yes.
games and stuff like that. So that's what's on her gravestone, or at least from the image I'm looking at here.
Cool. Good to know.
Yep.
All right. Well, okay. I mean, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
There you go. Your prevailing theory is still intact. You're
it's
good.
still intact. And so I will go back to like what I was going to say was like how I used to feel about it. Now I still feel that way about it now. Great. Wonderful. Awesome. This is one of my favorite things.
This is a family that is indeed still suffering from trauma.
Yeah. It's always been one of my favorite things about this movie is how do we avoid it always being about Uncle Ben?
Mm-hmm.
And they do make it all about Uncle Ben without ever mentioning Uncle Ben, which is, if anybody's ever lost a parent or somebody very close to you, you know that is a very normal thing to do, is to, like, it takes time for healing to be able to just talk about people like that again. And especially when it's tragic and so quickly somebody is taken away from you.
Mm-hmm.
The absence of Uncle Ben is felt in their lives, and it permeates throughout the film, to the point where I've always thought, and before it was Aunt May saying it in No Way Home, I always felt that there's the moment where when he's looking at his reflection in the water, in my mind, I've always heard a pseudo Uncle Ben's voice: with great power comes great responsibility. I didn't hear that this time.
Because you had this whole
because I thought Uncle Ben did exist.
head.
But here's the thing:
he no longer existed in this
even-
timeline in your mind.
but for me now, when I saw him look at it, it was more of a poignant, silent moment, and so I wanted to speak on how that moment still hit for me watching it this time.
Mm-hmm.
When he sees his reflection in the water, when he's pinned down by something. And it reminded me of you're alone. There's no sound around you. You only have yourself and your thoughts for your own company. What do you do in that moment? And so it hit me differently this time around. I still love this film. I think it's fantastic. I think that it absolutely nails the difficult position that it puts Spider-Man and Peter Parker in the MCU, where how do we start off his introduction? How do we do it? How do we, we got all of his origin in a single, line that he gives in Civil War. That leads us to, okay, now this is kind of like his second outing that we're getting with him, but how do we build a film around that? How do we build the Peter Parker, Spider-Man mythos? How do we take these iconic characters and how do we fit them around him? And I think they do a really great job of stealth giving us an MJ. I think that was that little peek at the little tease at the end was fantastic. I felt that I love every single one of the characters, whether it's side characters, the shout, the call out by Coach Wilson, right? Hannibal Buress's character.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
The
I think he's a war criminal now or something.
Yeah, I think he's a war criminal now.
Yeah.
And then plays the tape, and it's just perfect. It's so perfect. They nail this idea of what it's like to being a regular person in the MCU. But also, so let me phrase that, being a superhero in the MCU, but somebody who has to pretend that they're a normal person in the MCU. Because throughout all the other films, we get to see Thor is Thor. I am Iron Man. Critical moment for the entire MCU as a universe on superheroes' personal identities. Ant-Man. Arrested, known criminal. You go through all these superheroes, and how many of them actually have secret identities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. I think that'll come into play certainly more so in the next film-ish.
Sure.
It was also that interesting, where does that fall? And you can't really have that Spider-Man no more moment or whatever, or I guess the unmasking himself to the world in a world, that was very much one of the big things about Civil War was we can't, nobody has secret identities in this universe. So what does it matter? None of that matter. And so, yeah, him having to be a little bit more protective about that.
One, he's a minor. That's something to point out. They're you're a kid. There's legal, like there's a lot of stuff that goes on around it. But one thing I liked about it is
at the same time, he almost, goes full public at the end of this film.
Yeah. But I felt like the idea around what does it mean for somebody who does have to keep a secret identity? What does it mean for them when they have the bigger aspirations of being the big A-list superhero, but they're benched.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're just doing their neighborhood friendly Spider-Man thing in Queens. And you get kind of you get a ambition and desire to do great things from Spider-Man, a Spider-Man that normally in most stories is struggling to balance everything and it being overwhelmed by the greatness and not really being ready for it. And instead it's a different story. It's an ambitious young Spider-Man who wants to be Iron Man, who wants to be a great massive superhero, A-list superhero. And by the end of the film learns his lesson that actually I will know when I'm ready. It is a leap of faith, but where that is where my gut is telling me I need to be right now is being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And it's choosing to kind of like forego the dream to focus on what's important to him and what he's learned about his community and about the people around him, and to enjoy being a teenager. And I think that that's like some really cool stuff that he picks up and learns, and then also has like to deal with like the ramifications of what happens when your supervillains are a little close to home.
Mm-hmm.
Never get that moment in the theaters when you like the moment when he opens the door and you're like, oh, and he goes, Peter, and you're like, wait, what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is certainly an all-time great MCU moment for me, and I imagine for most people, if you did see that twist coming, good on you. I still like watching it now. I still look and I think like that was a really cool moment in the theater.
They nail it so well.
Logan, we throw it to you to contradict, I'm sure, a lot of what Cameron just said.
Yeah, we'll start. I think I'll start backwards, right? Like the MCUification stuff doesn't work for me. As we already addressed, it's luckily not a huge deal in this movie, but Cameron spent a lot.
There's definitely less of it than I remember. Like I think a lot of that comes from like Iron Man and Robert Downey Jr. being all over like the ads and the trailer stuff. So very much when like this movie, it is like, oh, he just pops up in a few scenes at like kind of the beginning, middle, and end of the movie. Oh, it's not that he's overwhelming you being Iron Man. It is he's popping in for a little mentor thing, and then he's going to let Tom Holland kind of make his own movie.
I think it doesn't work for me usually, but I think Robert Downey Jr. is just so charming that it helps. But I think to Cameron's point of like where Spider-Man fits into all of this and kind of his larger run, want to be a hero and secret identity and kind of balance and all of that. None of that. I mean, a lot of that I just didn't even think about in this movie because I don't think it's really an issue. Certainly compared to like I think the nature and like I think all three of the Tom Holland movies projecting kind of out into the future deal with his secret identity in a way less important way than the Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield movies do, where it feels much more relevant and pressing there. Which is sort of ironic because it's going to be in the Tom Holland movies where like he actually is unmasked, unlike the other, or I guess technically he is in Spider-Man 2, but like on a much smaller scale, right? Mm-hmm. This is the trilogy that I think sort of does it in the way that's like the least relevant and like least important and lands the less successfully for me. But it's also such a small part of this movie that it's kind of unimportant to the point of like what it looks like to have a superhero who has a secret identity. It is actually really interesting, like astute observation on Cam's part that like the MCU just doesn't really care about secret identities, which is sort of really
like, that was their mission statement
to think about.
From the first movie of like, I'm Iron Man. Okay. Yep. That like I remember just that being such a thing in 2008 of like, whoa, we're not going to do that, especially after, two 2 or 3 Sam Raimi movies at that point, plus all the X-Men stuff. It was like, wait,
plus the first two. I mean, we've had
Nolan's
we're gonna
Batman.
have 2 Batman, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
Like, wait, we're not gonna do secret identities. We're not gonna do this like will they, won't they? Who's gonna find out? Kind of, he's just gonna be out, and it was such like a wild thing, and that then loses kind of its impact when everybody's that.
And so it's interesting to think about that versus like obviously how all of us would have been raised in terms of like superheroes keep their identities secret. But I just looked at like how the DC movies do it, or even some of the older Marvel movies did it, and I can see how it works. The 2 big things I kind of want to quickly go on, at least on this point, is I don't know if I could disagree strongly enough with Cameron's assertion that by the end of this movie, Tom Holland is just leaning into being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, because I think that's just not the case at all. I think Tom Holland is never the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man in any of his movies until the last 5 minutes of No Way Home. I think is when he embraces being like the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and he gets like the suit and swings out the window and like lets go of like all of these people or the characters. And I think throughout Homecoming, Far From Home, and most of No Way Home, he's not the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man because he's going to space and is working alongside the Avengers. It's just by the nature of how these movies are framed, working and operating on a way bigger scale and like kind of grandiose nature than Tobey or Andrew Garfield Spider-Man.
Can I pause an inquiry for you real quick, Logan?
Go ahead.
I just had a kind of like aha moment, and I'm curious if this is the case or not.
Mm-hmm.
Is it because he is not is it because he has like high-tech stuff? Is it because his suit, for example, in all 3 of these movies is super high-tech and advanced?
That's a good question. I think that is an element of what I don't like about his movies, right? Like that is not an invalid argument, but I think it's just the reality of like his movies. He's just, the first movie we see Tom Holland as Spider-Man, he's fighting alongside Captain America and like Thor, right? And Iron Man and Black Panther. Like, it's just like from the jump, he's not a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He's like Spider-Man, like at like 10 years into his career kind of Spider-Man in terms of like doing all this other stuff, right?
Yeah. I just real quick, I would make the argument, I largely agree with you that for the majority of his time, especially kind of coming out of this movie, because the very next thing he does is go into space. He doesn't like this movie ends being like, he's going to be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And so, maybe there's a few months in there that we don't see on camera where he's, a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. But I would say what we see on screen, I would say he's kind of forced into it in between Germany and when kind of things really start popping off in this movie. But he is out there helping the bodega. He's, stopping a ATM robbery in his neighborhood. He's helping lady down the street getting churros. And I will always remember seeing this movie at Alamo Drafthouse the opening night. And they timed it so they dropped churros off on our like desks at that line in the film. Like, why did I mention the churro thing? So I think like he is a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man for a small chunk of this movie, and it is like that. Just it's a montage, much like we had montages with like Maguire and maybe not Garfield, because Garfield's like montage was I'm angrily going after the guy I think killed my Uncle Ben.
I'm assaulting innocent New Yorkers until I find the one man who fits this description.
The other montages I'm grieving at the end of Amazing Spider-Man 2. It doesn't really get too many happy montages in his case.
So I would say like he had that little bit, but it very much to your point, like he didn't really want to be a friendly neighbor. He already felt he was ready for bigger things, having come off of Civil War. So he feels like he's kind of sidelined for a lot of that when we see him in this movie being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
The other my single biggest critique with Tom Holland as Spider-Man in general, right, is, and the one that is, I think, the most polarized, right? Like I feel like people either really agree with this or really don't agree with it, and there's not a lot in the middle. And so I try to craft it in a nuanced position, is that Tom Holland, Peter Parker, he is a brat, right? And sort of by design, right? Like he's just sort of like a bratty, kind of obnoxious 16-year-old kid like you would imagine him to be, right? And that's, in some ways, that's really cool, actually, to see like a 16-year-old selfish Peter Parker, right? Because that's probably what he would be when he is a superhero, right? But he's selfish, right? Like he's certainly selfish in a level that is true to his age, but it's also a level that doesn't resonate with me, right? And I think it's because Tom Holland's Peter Parker doesn't learn lessons until No Way Home. And so, especially at the time, a lot of my issues with Homecoming is that he just sort of keeps being a shitty friend again and again and again. And like, sort of like, he just kind of gets people to like forgive him, or gets Ned to forgive him, really. But he's not really ever learning lessons in the same way that Toby or Andrew do, or just Peter Parker does in general. And part of the thing to remember is that like this is the youngest interpretation of Peter we've gotten. Like, even though in Spider-Man 1, Animated Spider-Man 1, he's in high school, at least in part of those movies. Mm-hmm. He's like very clearly like a senior in high school in both those movies, and is very quickly out of high school in Spider-Man 1, right, and into college. Whereas here he's like firmly like,
he's a sophomore.
Yeah, exactly.
They call him. He's a sophomore, of course. Like, you're the only sophomore that could go out with a senior like Liz.
Yeah, right? He's like, I am a child. He's like, I am literally a child, right? Like, I'm not a senior in high school, even like I am a child. I'm getting driven to like prom by like my date's dad, kind of thing, right? And so, you know, I think a lot of his like selfish tendencies and his kind of like brattiness are part and parcel with that,
notably,
right?
They're getting driven to Homecoming, not prom.
Yes, thank you. But like it's sort of part and parcel with like the age that he's at versus where the other one's at. Because especially in Toby's case, he's able to be Spider-Man for a year. Like, he actually goes through like a 6-year journey over his 3 movies. Like, they actually take place kind of in real world time for the most part. And so like he's like in his mid 20s, right, canonically, or like late 20s by the time this Spider-Man 3 is happening. And Andrew Garfield, Tom Holland's are kind of done in a much more compressed timeline, not counting the 5-year blip.
That throws just even more of a wrinkle in the timeline of things. Yeah,
it's just sort of the reality of the situation here, right? And so it's something that has always rubbed me the wrong way. And I like Tom Holland the most in No Way Home, which in a lot of ways is sort of how I described Skyfall is sort of a like backdoor pilot to the original 20 Bond films, and that like it sets up Bond to sort of where he was at to then step into those movies. No Way Home almost sort of works as like setting him up to like where Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man movies kind of take him forward and kind of get into that same point. Mm-hmm. I definitely Homecoming and Far From Home are almost like the prologues to that in a lot of ways. And his like Spider-Man arc.
Real quick, I definitely think that Cameron's point about like technology, especially given your point there, is maybe a significant factor in your kind of determination here, because obviously, like it's going to end with him. All right, he doesn't have any more Stark bells and whistles. He does have just his himself in a suit at that point. But even here, like he is making his own web fluid and stuff like that, so he's still doing a lot of the Spider-Man things himself.
And at the end of the whole point is at the end of the film, he loses access to the whole like suit stuff, and he has to go back again.
That's why I said the suit stuff is like a piece of it, but I don't think it's the entirety, right? Like, I think the issue is with Peter Parker, not with Spider-Man. I mean, I think part of it is Spider-Man, but like, I think Peter is just a character.
I'm just confused because how do you see him at the end of this movie making the decision and realizing, you know what, I am a kid. I did learn my lesson that, you know, just because I want to be part of something bigger doesn't mean that I'm necessarily feel like I'm ready for it. And like learning to temper his dreams and ambition with.
Do you think he does? I don't know if I would say that
he literally said
as much as he's just sort of is like like I don't view it as tempering as much as like delaying it, right?
He thinks that he's passed a test by turning down becoming an Avenger. He thinks that we as the audience knows, right? But we as the audience know he was really going to get that as a reward. But from Peter, he's saying, "Hey, I know I'm not ready yet. Oh, this was a test. you're a great mentor, Mr. Stark. I'm really appreciative. And that's another thing too, is like, I feel like you're like, he's a brat. I'm like, I mean, he's kind of a little shitty.
Right, that's
But
what I'm saying.
I don't see it as being bratty as much as it's just being like a teenager.
Yeah,
well, that's what
And
I
being
said.
young
Is that it's
and
sort of
being
part
a
and
little
parcel with
selfish. Yeah,
his-
I think that
right?
fits overall. I just think, like when you said he was like a brat, I was like, I don't know about that. But
there's very charged words and whatnot.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
like we
for-
all bring our
That's,
own.
and that's
you know,
why I
Yeah,
tried.
our own
That's why I
perspective to
tried
it,
to
for
like
sure.
add like the nuance to it.
yeah,
right,
and I
right.
appreciated that afterwards. So anybody who's saw my initial reaction watching
right.
it, are gonna be like, oh no, like no, I heard where you ended up with that. I just didn't think that I agreed with the launch point of that, but I do think he does learn lessons, and also he learns. I think in the like we'll talk about it next week. When we record it. That like I think that he learns a lot of like very crucial lessons as Peter Parker about. But I think a lot of his lessons are about himself and learning to trust his instincts, and learning that I feel like a lot of his lessons that he learns are less about like these big moral play lessons of, oh, I have all this power, so I have responsibility, and more of it's you have a power and you have a future, and like you have this set up in front of you. Now, how are you going to temper yourself, and how are you going to, and by temper I don't mean like how are you going to turn yourself down? I mean temper as in like how are you going to prepare yourself?
I think it's a really good point too, Cam, that something you sort of said there too, that I think lies at the heart of the difference between Holland's Peter Parker Spider-Man versus Andrew Garfield's, and in particular Tobey Maguire, is that he has real potential and ambition and opportunity, I think is a key word, that Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker different, and definitely Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker didn't, right? Who very much is like has nothing and is poor and is like living like in the shittiest of shitty apartments in New York City in Spider-Man 2, right? And is barely making rent, right? And you know, each of the three Spider-Men I think get wealthier over the three respective trilogies, right?
Spider-Man 2, Amazing Spider-Man, definitely the wealthiest.
Yeah, like
like a full on nice home in Queens. Like
this one definitely feels certainly way more secure, and even in terms of just like, yeah, like he's going to like a nice like special school for like smart kids, right? Versus like,
well, it's a magnet
where,
school. That's
like,
pretty normal.
Yeah. Tom Holland is like the only one that it seems actually got life insurance money from Uncle Ben's death.
Yeah, and this is sort of my point, right? Versus like Tobey Maguire didn't, right? Or even in terms of like, you know, say what you will about it, but like Tom Holland Spider-Man has a wealthy billionaire benefactor, and the way that like Tobey Maguire is just trying to like, he can't even keep a job at like a pizza place, right? Like that guy get him a break, right? Like it's just sort of like the level of like opportunity and real privilege, right, that is afforded here versus how the other two have, is like an interesting thing to sort of view through how all three of those characters grow and evolve and the struggles they sort of encounter, right? And like I think that's part of why, for me, I really enjoy his character in No Way Home a lot, right? Where I think he is sort of stripped of a lot of that.
Absolutely,
and is sort of grounded in a way that feels very reminiscent of Tobey in Spider-Man 2, right? He has no sort of safety net, no sort of support system. And or even, I mean, Andrew Garfield's a little bit weird. Those movies are messy, but certainly feels very Tobey-esque, right? In No Way Home, and I think the presence of Tobey helps with that, obviously. But like, I think here it's harder to view him as a, you know, down on your luck, like everyman character when he, you know, you say a magnet school is normal. That's super fancy to me from growing up in Missouri, right? And so, you know,
it's pretty distant.
He's going to like a smart kids. He's going to like a smart kids school. He's in like a wealthier, you know, socioeconomic background than Tobey Maguire is, right? He just has more privilege and opportunity, and so it's interesting to see the evolution he goes on and the natural, I think, way that he would just feel like a bit more of like a little shit in some ways, like you said, to use your kind of vernacular, Cameron, versus I think where Tobey Spider-Man can't, or Peter Parker can't be like that, right? He never had the opportunity to be a shit. He had never had any sort of privilege at all.
The opening of Spider-Man, the bus driver is pulling a prank and like leaving him behind on purpose.
Yeah,
like,
and that's
like
I
you
think
you can't set up a bigger loser than Tobey Maguire's
and
Peter Parker.
Trevor is going to say something to the contrary a little bit, but like I think there is something to be said for the fact that like and we talked a lot about this before, but like I think there's something to be said for Peter Parker being like the embodiment of just like like the nerdy kind of like loser guy that me and Cameron talked a lot about in this Raimi films, right? And like that is not Tom Holland is cool. Like he's just a cool dude. And like Andrew Garfield was not supposed to be cool in his movies, but he's Andrew Garfield, and so it's hard to not be cool.
Andrew Garfield's still the most fuckable Spider-Man. So.
Yeah, 100%, right? And like 100%. Peter Maguire just like he can just be not cool in a very easy way. And so it's not even a thing that I necessarily dislike. It's very interesting to view all three through these kind of different socioeconomic backgrounds and privileges that each kind of were afforded, and how that affects and frames the stories and growth that they then undertake, right?
And I think on top of that, just to add to that a little bit before Trevor, I will definitely let you talk.
I was gonna say I've got like stuff in the chamber that I've just been waiting for a while.
And I'm just gonna throw this out here. It also speaks to the fact that the first two Spider-Man franchises we get, he's the only superhero. There isn't a billionaire Tony Stark around.
Yeah.
So when you flip around to, what does it look like in an interconnected universe where you like everybody's benefactor is Tony Stark? Nobody is going to be the dirt broke superhero unless they really commit to that, or they are so outside of the sphere of influence of Tony Stark and the Avengers. And by virtue of bringing him in Civil War, you are directly bringing him into that sphere of influence. And that means he's immediately going to be giving those options and opportunities that come with being in that sphere of influence under Tony Stark. So I think on top of that, you're definitely not seeing that until they literally have to magically strip that away from him to make him alone. And I think that says a lot about like where that ends up being and why I think you are so attached to that, because we do traditionally see Peter Parker as somebody struggling to get by. And we don't get to see that until the very end, when he literally has Trevor. Everything taken away from him.
So for me,
I don't think you disagree. I think just because I don't think Trevor's going to disagree with that. I think he's just going to make some observations.
It's very much for me, the struggle that Peter goes through in this movie and the other movies isn't a struggle for like the technology and stuff like that. Obviously, he's got a leg up over his predecessors by quite a deal because of the billionaire philanthropist helping him out. And so for me, a lot of it is he's still going through a lot of the same core struggles that other Peter Parkers have gone through, in the sense of being selfish versus being selfless. And there are plenty of times in this movie, like, he starts to go down the selfish path of, I am going to go to the party. I'm going to show up as Liz. I'm going to swing in. We're going to do a whole thing. And then something happens. He's like, oh, I need to go take care of that. And so he, time and time again, does pick the selfless option. He could just go in and enjoy homecoming with Liz and have a great time. But no, he knows that, Liz's dad is going to do something. So he makes the selfless choice instead of the selfish choice. And so that's where it, like, so the idea of like him being selfish, I don't see it, I guess, as much as you do, or maybe it like where you see selfish, I see headstrong or something like that is maybe that's just the lens that you and I are looking at things through differently in that regard. But for me, it is largely like you saying, oh, he doesn't learn lessons. I think, no, he learns the same lessons that all the other Peters learn of, like, obviously going into this, he's already kind of learned once and will learn again. With great power comes great responsibility. That is the pivotal one that, like, the others learn in their first outing. We kind of skipped that. So, so he doesn't have to like learn that lesson in the way that Toby and Andrew did. And so it does become more about balancing those relationships, balancing who knows who I am versus who doesn't. And obviously he's going to open up that net more than anybody else, by his own hand or by others. And I'll say, this would be something we'll dive into maybe more next week. But like the exciting thing of his, identity being revealed to the world following the second movie was very much like, what kind of Spider-Man is that going to look like? And then they kind of magic it away pretty quickly in No Way Home, in a way that's
enough.
like, oh, that was a little unsatisfying, but it's really cool, the other things you're throwing into it. But yeah, for me it is like, admittedly, I'm not sitting here thinking on like, if I like, what kind of video essays could I write about the lessons Spider-Man learns in each kind of iteration? So I'm not actively going through my brain right now and trying to figure out, well, what lesson did Toby learn in Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3? Because like nothing really jumps out as like, oh, this is very clearly the lessons he learned in his movies. This is very clearly the lesson. I mean, like, we joked about it a lot. Like, the lesson Andrew Garfield learns is like, I need to be protective, except because the dangerous promises are the best to break kind of thing. It's like, oh, you've just completely undone any kind of character development here at the end of this film. I hope that doesn't bite you in the ass in the next movie kind of thing. So yeah, for me, it's I don't see Peter as selfish as maybe you guys do, and I think that is just largely a lens of the terminology we're using.
Sure.
Because I do focus on those times when like Ned keeps trying to get him to make the selfish choice, and he keeps saying, "No, I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. I need to do this other thing."
You're being a bad friend. It's like, you're asking me to be a bad person, Ned.
Yeah.
Like, but then Ned gets to be the guy in the chair, and that fulfills all of Ned's dreams.
Yeah. So yeah, I think the biggest discrepancy or the biggest difference really between all of these Spider-Man is that yes, this one has a significant leg up in the tech, and as a result, that gives them a significant leg up in the things they can do with that tech, i.e., following the Vulture's crew to DC and and using the bugs and hacking into his suit with Ned and all that, like, the training wheels program, taking all that stuff off. And I think at the end of the day, as is very much kind of the point made by this movie, like, you still take all that away and Peter still like is at his core a good guy and still has the tools he needs, even if it is just his makeshift first suit that he pulls out of storage basically to finish out this film. He does, like, he lives up to, if you're nothing without the suit, you don't deserve it kind of thing that obviously we get here. And so I guess that would be like that, and like, yeah, I am going to stay on the ground a little bit longer are the big lessons he learns here. So those are different lessons that he needed to learn in this one compared to, hey, I need to keep myself, like, he's already learned I need to, not tell people my identity to keep them safe. And the only people that find out by a fluke. And I would also say he's also, and the movie definitely plays with, the hierarchies and tropes in a different way compared to like the Flash Thompson we get of Tobey Maguire, or even the Flash Thompson, especially the Flash Thompson we got in Andrew Garfield stuff of like just beating up and the entire school going along with Flash beating somebody up. So the fact that this Flash is also a nerd and is just like a nerd bullying another nerd, like, I think he's like outcast enough, and he's not portrayed as a cool kid enough. Like, he's cool to his academic decathlete friends, and that's about it.
Flash literally gives him the nickname Penis Parker.
Yeah, and
everyone goes up
cheers along with it. Yeah.
Yep.
So like,
everyone loves it.
He's still nerdy, and he doesn't also have the cool I can skateboard thing, at least. So
Andrew Garfield is unquestionably like the coolest of all three of them. There's no argument to that.
Yeah. So yeah, I think those are kind of just my general overview thoughts. I definitely see where you guys are coming from, but I think I do think,
sure,
going back to what I said, I do think we get, and I had forgotten about it really until revisiting this. So it isn't like, yes, because the very next thing he's going to do is literally go off into space, we forget the little bit at this, the opening of this one, after he's back and nobody's answering his calls and he's just leaving voicemails for Happy about like his day, which I do love that, like, they're listening to and they're like taking that feedback, they're giving it to Tony. So Tony calls back and says, why didn't you just stay with the churro lady? Like, why didn't you just keep helping her out? Why'd you have to try and do something more? So we do get like that little, again, a very quick montage of him being a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. But yeah, certainly not. And I think it goes to what, something we talked about, I think, in one of the Andrew Garfield ones, of like, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man just isn't going to be a thing that they can really pull him off on a movie, because the movie always has to be about the big bombastic thing. So at most you're going to get like a first act where he's a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man helping out the little guy. And I like that in this we see Peter at the bodega cracking jokes with Delmar, asking for the sandwich pressed, and petting the cat, and joking about, like, Delmar's joking about his hot Aunt May and stuff, and then he helps that guy out, and it comes back even later when he's doing the interrogation with Donald Glover's character of like Delmar's has the best sandwiches. No, this other place. All right, come on, let's he is of the neighborhood, even if we're not going to see him in it as much, and
he gets in a fight about bodega sandwiches. There's nothing more like small neighborhood New York than that.
It's very much like, especially hot off playing Marvel's Spider-Man 2, and I've got my 19 inches of Venom behind me over my shoulder, laying down because it's the only way it'll fit on any of my shelves.
The only way it'll fit for Trevor is if it's on its side.
Yeah, you're gonna get way more friendly neighborhood Spider-Man in that because you can in over the course of a 30-hour game kind of thing, that I don't know if any movie's ever really going to live on the neighborhood Spider-Man in a fulfilling way.
I think the best example of this to me is Spider-Man 2, in terms of like him being a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man and him just being I think Spider-Man 1 and 2 feel so New York, and Spider-Man 2 in particular feels so New York, and part of that is unquestionably like the effects of like 9/11, but also just like that movie lives and breathes like being poor in New York City, right? And just being in New York in general, and it's such of that city and vibe. And him, to me, Spider-Man 2 has like the Spider-Man like lesson arc, right? Of like him kind of grappling with having to choose whether or not to be Spider-Man, right? And leaving being Spider-Man and trying to reconcile this, and like getting to be like, I can be happy or I can be Spider-Man in some ways, right? But knowing that he is of greater service as Spider-Man, and even if it has to sacrifice kind of other things. And it's interesting watching Spider-Man 2 with how little he's actually fighting Doc Ock in that movie, right? And how much of the movie is actually him either just fighting like petty criminals, just solving like small crimes, or just like being a dude in the city, right? And like that movie's in a lot of ways like really kind of lets you, I think, linger in that. And No Way Home is the only Tom Holland movie where he's just like in New York City the entire time, right? Like he obviously goes to DC. He's not in New York at all, basically, in Far From Home. And so
that's kind of the point.
He'll be there.
Right,
He'll be there at the beginning, the opening a little bit, but
but like you know what I mean, right? Yeah, but like versus like No Way Home, like he actually gets to just like be in New York City, and not that it really feels that much like a New York movie because there's a lot of other stuff happening. But I think there's something to be said for just like I think the stakes are very different in Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3 versus the stakes in certainly No Way Home, but even like Far From Home degree. Like the stakes are the lowest here, and that's part of what makes, somehow we haven't talked about him at all, Vulture such a great villain, right? Is that he is so low stakes, right? And he is so kind of small fry in a way that feels really cool. Like it is just like something that's affected New York City, and that's it.
And he's
been deliberately under the radar for 8 years. He's been trying to operate at a low stake, and he has that bit at the end, which I was going to circle back to in terms of like this Peter. While this Peter does have all that tech stuff, like I love that scene where the Vulture kind of calls out like, your friend Tony Stark, paying for all the gadgets. He doesn't understand working guys like us, Pete.
So good. It's so good.
Because without all that, and without obviously the Stark internship, Peter is still a poor, middle class kind of character who, yes, maybe has like a good scholarship to a school, but Michael Keaton obviously great.
Michael Keaton's phenomenal.
He's so
Michael
good.
Keaton is so good. I think he's so clearly the best part of this movie. Like every time he comes on screen, everything just like stops. Like his interaction, like his chemistry with Tom Holland is so good.
His
It's such a gift.
Yeah, he is so amazing in the way that
Yeah.
I'll never forget like when he like yeah, he's right. He's right to be like yeah, I don't
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like from the jump, like
Yeah.
the people who made this mess are going to be the ones who clean it up, or like getting paid to clean it up. What kind of like, which is like sadly, of course, far too like realistic, and too close to home.
like investing every last penny you have to get this big job because it's gonna pay for you and your crew for the next year plus.
And not even that, but like you were promised this job, so you invested more resources into it, and now the government's going to pull that contract from you, and you're to blame for that? No, absolutely, he would have had a case on his hands.
But also, like,
but I would much rather see him deck the douchey like suit about it.
And the way that he goes about it too, it's like what is he doing with the technology? Is it ethical or moral?
I mean, no. He's a bad guy.
No, he's a bad person.
He's an arms dealer.
He's an arms dealer.
He's a sci-fi arms dealer. Absolutely,
but how did he get? But the biggest point is like, how did he get pushed to that point? He did it because he was a hardworking, honest, earnest dude, and it just shows the devolution of, I guess, deterioration of his moral fiber is over the course of this film, to the point where at the very end he's ready to kill this kid to get the job done.
Mm-hmm.
But what I like about him
like,
too is that that he isn't like, he's a more messy bad dude, right? Like he isn't just like pure evil, right? Like in some ways there are some I think like echoes of like Doc Ock, right? A little bit here, right? Like he's not an evil dude. He's sort of been like, in Doc Ock says he's sort of like driven insane, but he's sort of just been like pushed into this other place, right? Like where he's not a bad guy. And even Doc Ock sort of like obviously comes back to like the good side here, and like Vulture doesn't go all the way here, right? And I think that is in very marked contrast to really any Goblin iteration, but even like a lot of the other villains we have throughout either Spider-Man or the MCU at large, right? Which I think we would all probably agree that like the MCU does a lot of things well. Villains are not necessarily one of them, and I think he is one of the best MCU villains precisely because he is so human and so flawed, but also he's, he is a sci-fi arms dealer, as Trevor said, but he's also like an amazing dad, like who like loves his kids so much, and it's like a family man that's just trying to provide for like them and his crew, and is so working class, right? And you can see like 8 different like versions of his life that went so radically different than where he's at now, and that almost makes him that much more tragic, right? That he's in some ways he's sort of Shakespearean in how like he sort of was pushed into this place and then became bad because of it, but is also trying to like flirt between the good and bad sides of like his nature.
I think another thing to point out too is in a post-Civil War, post-Avengers, where like S.H.I.E.L.D. as like this authoritarian like menace almost at certain points, whether it's their program tracking all the dangerous individuals in the world, or that, I mean,
the fact that it was a Hydra front for decades.
Oh yeah, for decades.
Like, I'd forgotten, like they call out the Triskelion crash kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like that job.
All of that. And what I love about that though is it kind of shows like, hey, by the way, when S.H.I.E.L.D. says, oh, we acquired this, or we did that, or we shut this down here, this is the front end. This is the people end of it, is regular people getting hurt by these, or being pushed out by these overarching government entities like S.H.I.E.L.D.
Mm-hmm.
And so S.H.I.E.L.D., like, because here's the thing, this never would have happened if S.H.I.E.L.D. had paid him back, but they didn't choose to. They chose to just take it.
I mean, yeah. Well, it wasn't S.H.I.E.L.D., it was damage control.
Damage control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tony Stark and a government-led thing, joint task force kind of thing. But yeah, it's like I very much love Vulture and Michael Keaton's performance here, obviously, because of like, yeah, he is driven 99% by his family, looking out for his family, trying to do right for his family. And so like the only time like he kills one of his henchmen is because his henchman basically threatens, to expose him and thereby threatens his family. And even there, he wasn't trying to kill the guy. He thought it was an anti-grav gun or something like that.
Yep.
He doesn't show a lot of remorse that he killed the guy, but
well, to be fair, this is the first shocker, and he is a gigantic asshole.
Oh yeah.
So
But it's still like, you did just kill a man, so you could blink instead of just kind of quipping it away.
Michael Keaton,
But yeah, to the broader point, like he specifically he doesn't kill Peter on multiple occasions.
On multiple
And
occasions,
even in the post credits thing, he doesn't give up Peter because he initially because he saved his daughter's life. And I love that the whole sequence of from him opening the door to the car ride to the dance.
Yeah, the car ride in particular is
car ride, the lighting, everything's so perfect.
Yeah.
The every little bit of dialogue, you see him putting everything together. You see him absolutely piece together everything he needs to know and makes the decision. All right, well, you saved my daughter's life, so I'm going to take that into consideration, not just kill you outright because you've been getting in my way. I'm going to give you a chance to, let me do my thing. Go in there, have a good time, not too good a time. All of that stuff.
He's such menace
and also, also with the perfect Michael Keaton menace to it, and madness, and not only is it oh, he's the worst possible girlfriend's dad you could get on in this situation, but also oh, he's also holding a gun behind the headrest in case you make the wrong choice right now. It's such a perfect distillation of those characters, and it's such a beautiful not only do you see him piecing together everything he knows, you see Peter piecing together that he can piece together everything he needs to know because of what Liz is saying in those moments, and him having to cop to it because he can't just outright lie because Liz will call him on it. And so he does have to say, no, I wasn't up there. I saw it all from the ground, and know that that's all Vulture's going to need to know to piece together. Oh, because you were the guy who helped out. Yeah. So I love just the back and forth throughout that entire scene, mixed with the red light on his face turning to the green light on his face is just beautiful cinematography and all that.
I will also say massive shout out to the cinematography in this movie. It's so good.
And yeah, even in the later scene where they have the showdown in the warehouse and he specifically isn't going for the kill shot with the glider. Yeah, he's destroying the rest of the building and going to bring it all down on him. But he's seen what this kid can do. It's an educated enough guess that this will put him down and get him out of the way, but not kill him. Peter will still be okay because I don't want to kill this kid. This kid is somebody special to my daughter. I don't want to send her through that trauma.
And it's just a kid.
And he's just a kid.
There's an actual image he's just a kid, right?
Yeah. And he's 16. He doesn't understand the nuances of what I'm doing for my business. You see those wheels turning. Yeah. That this is not a super villain. This is this is a sci-fi arms dealer who at the very end feels himself pushed into a corner where he's going to try to kill Peter. But up until that point, because what else are you supposed to do? He dropped a building on the kid.
Any other favorite bits or highlights or anything we want to give some love to? I'll shout out because it's one that always gets a chuckle out of me. Is him in the suburbs trying to be Spider-Man, and he's running out there and then it just goes into an empty field, and running across a golf course at night with sprinklers on. This sucks. And then obviously the homage that they very pointedly knew they were doing, so they just also show a scene from Ferris Bueller's Day Off of running through all this stuff. There's so much. That's where knowing that this was, and knowing that John Hughes stuff and those kinds of movies were very much an inspiration for a lot of the story stuff. I absolutely adore that. I love also the it's small little bits, but I love the little bits we get with the decathlon nerds, in particular the one that always rings the bell to say you suck, Flash, or whatever his little things, and Martin Starr's what have I told you about using the bell for comedic timing or comedic purposes? I love their little, just the little crew that they put together. They make the most of the limited time they get.
MJ being I protest going up there. This was built by slaves, and be it wasn't built by slaves. Looking over the guy and be
and the security guard's yeah,
and be okay, Also, Zendaya just being the perfect stealth MJ.
Like I'll
So
say
good.
the like making her an MJ at the end. I love her and I love her dynamic. I didn't think that like they could have kept her Michelle. Like this could have just been a new character. It didn't need to have like an MJ connotation.
Well, I love her.
Kind of
She's like my friend. Well, my friends call me MJ, and they're like, "You don't have any friends."
Mm-hmm.
So good.
It is to that point. Trevor, I haven't really thought about this before, but it is interesting because of where her and Peter's arc will eventually go at the end. We're just going to spoil it over him, but like at the end of No Way Home, and it was like them not being together at the end of that movie, that they, like you said, it sort of bothered making her MJ, because it's not like they make her MJ just like they can have them be like happily ever after at the end. Like they have them go off in kind of very different directions, and so it is interesting that either bother.
But now he
her
gets
MJ.
to bang Black Cat, and it's guilt free.
I mean, all right, Cameron. I don't think you needed to take us there. I mean, like, there's also like,
Who's Black?
all
Felicia
but
Hardy.
Felicia Hardy. Like, she's
Okay,
not
thank
been
you.
in any of the movies or anything like
Yeah,
that.
that's what I was like, what?
It's not. I mean, not she was in Amazing Spider-Man 2. She was not Rose Byrne. She was solo or Rogue One lady's character.
Oh yeah,
From that. They obviously didn't go that route, but yeah, that would have been Black Cat if they'd maybe made a third or something. But I would say, I mean, to
Right.
that, let's also remember 2017 when this came out, and even the casting of Zendaya as like the love interest. Racist shit fans on
Absolutely.
the internet,
Oh, sure.
and
Well,
fans
yeah,
in air
and,
quotes
yeah.
were like, not our MJ kind of thing. So even that is like kind of a she is your MJ, deal with it kind of thing. But I still would have been fine if she'd just been Michelle. I think it feels like, especially like when the next, like she's not even going to be Michelle anymore, really. She is just going to go by MJ in the next couple movies. Is like okay, but she's not Mary Jane. Like so it's you've just taken
it's definitely like a fan service moment
thing,
to give us. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. No, well, it doesn't matter. We won't go to but like, it was just an interesting choice. They kind of went down that route. But it was a nice pop
also
moment.
that,
but like seeing kind of where they went with it, sort of like, is it just you gave it for like the one pop and you didn't have anything kind of you're going to do with this?
Yeah. If anything, I mean, like she's so much better, she's so much more than MJ, and I love that she is such a different romantic interest flavor. I mean, she's like arguably not even the romantic interest of this film, and that will really come to the head in the next film. But her character is largely going to stay the same in the next film in terms of like she's more standoffish, she's more antagonistic, she's not a Gwen Stacy or she's not a Kirsten Dunst Mary Jane Watson. She is a completely different flavor for a Peter Parker romance character that we're going to get. So I do appreciate that we're not like retreading old territory for that as well. At least
I will say to the just to make a note on it too, like for in terms of like all of the like fan reaction or some fan community reaction.
Fake fans. They're fake fans.
Right. And this is sort of my point is that like, I would argue almost out of like any MCU character, Spider-Man is maybe the most deliberately by design egalitarian, like anyone can wear the mask, right? Like it's sort of woven into the ethos of the character from the very beginning and inception, right? Is that he is everyone and everyone is Spider-Man. That it again is just a reminder that comic book hero fans are the most adept at completely missing the point of what the stories and heroes are actually about.
I mean, Star Wars fans give them a run for their money, but
oh yeah, for sure.
Well, there's a Venn diagram where they're actually the same people.
Yeah.
So that's the problem.
Shout out to Last Jedi. Yeah, absolutely.
I also do love Ned in this. I love the like
that's cool.
The accidental discovery. And then I love the camaraderie that they get, obviously, through the rest of it. And I think like so much of that is a flavor that we didn't get with Toby or Andrew. Like the
certainly
fact that
with Andrew,
we get a Spider-Man that can talk to other people about being Spider-Man. And
or just like has a friend in Andrew's case. He didn't have like anyone really. Yeah.
True. Yeah. So I love that. I love even like the little bit, where they're having a montage doing the tracking stuff, and like, Ned's wearing the mask at some point.
So funny.
So yeah, shout out to that. And also him having Happy or Tony to kind of like also call on makes it so we're not just like in Peter's head, as we, especially in the Tobey Maguire era stuff, we get so many like internal monologue bits that this team very specifically was like, we don't think we can make that work in the MCU, so let's have a suit that Peter can talk to if he's going to be alone, even in that regard. And we'll get it again kind of with glasses in the next movie.
You want to know who I am?
Yeah.
My story's not for the faint of heart.
So yeah, I love that he has like his guy in the chair, and I love like the payoff to the guy in the chair stuff of him, and it being such like a low key guy in the chair that he's using the like school library computers. One is like, and like the things he's doing on them are such like different degrees of difficulty of like, all right, I'm hacking into Stark Towers so I can call Happy Hogan, and I'm also looking up the car manual of Flash's car to tell you how to turn on the headlights. Like, I love that dichotomy.
Yes.
And his excitement for doing that and swinging around. And then I also love the payoff of like the teacher finding him and being like, I'm looking at porn.
I'm looking at porn right now.
Yeah. So I love them, and there's just such joy there. And also like his whole bit with the hat is also fun.
Mm-hmm.
Some men wear hats, Ned, but that hat is wearing you. And then also like, the hat's not working at all, Peter, help, where are you? Like his whole dismay, but then he brings it back around for Homecoming. Obviously, you see him back in the hat. So I love the extended cast of characters that we get here. But yes, very much I agree that like the standout in this is easily Michael Keaton's Vulture. And I also say I love, especially as we kind of maybe segue into some of the bits and stuff and the segments, that like it's the Vulture and the Vulture's crew. Like all of the named villains that we get in this film really are just Vulture's henchmen, and the Vulture. So I love it, like even that is a nice like way of still doing a multi-villain story and having, a kind of like a mini boss or mid boss kind of for a little bits of it, but still making it feel like part of a whole instead of, all right, we're going to fight the Rhino at the beginning of Amazing Spider-Man, and then we're going to do Electro, and then, oh yeah, the Green Goblin's also still in here, guys. Let's not forget about that here at the end, and let's bring Rhino back one more time. Like this all feels like of a singular through line that I really appreciate as well.
No, that's a great question, or a great point.
All right. Any final favorite bits or also least favorite things? Obviously, I think we've aired enough of our grievances about it. But if there's anything in here that does stand out as like I also really hate this bit, feel free.
Nope.
No.
All right. Then let's dive into our report card from A+ to F. What do we want to give Spider-Man: Homecoming? Logan, let's throw to you first, as I imagine I'm going to be the warmest on this one,
most positive on it. I feel good with a B.
Okay.
I feel good with a B.
So yeah, I mean, like all that said, still a good grade. It's still a fun Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like ultimately, it's not a bad movie. I think it is flawed, right? Its interpretation of Peter doesn't work for me. But weirdly enough, it doesn't matter. Right? I think so much is working around it, and I genuinely can't stress enough how good Michael Keaton is here. Like I think he's pretty clearly a top 5 MCU villain for me in terms of just like how great he is. That he just sort of lifts everything else with him, and his chemistry with Peter in particular. Like the scene, like you said, from like the front door all the way to the drive from the Homecoming to him in the car with Peter at Homecoming, like that whole 5-minute sequence, I think is one of the strongest sequences of like all of like this era of the MCU. Like it's so good, and particularly because the MCU writing is typically not the most deep, we'll go with, right?
Yeah.
It's not that like deep and doesn't have that much, I think, a level of kind of subtlety and nuance to it that is just like pervading this whole interaction and exchange, and the level of like menace and kind of wheels quickly turning and right, and like cogs clicking together, and kind of swifting from obliviousness to knowing to menace to cheerfulness, kind of also in together. It's, I think, just like an expertly written and directed and acted scene. That is in a lot of ways kind of the heart of the movie. Is everything's kind of pivoted and turning from that point onwards. I think it's great. I mean, my issue with Peter, right? I'm never gonna love Tom Holland's as Spider-Man and Peter Parker, for a lot of issues I said. But I also think that, you know, I've grown to appreciate him more over time, right? And yeah, ultimately, I think a B feels good to me.
Cool. How about you, Cam?
For me, this is a solid A minus. I think that there is a the only reason I'm ranking it an A minus is because I kind of know where this is going to go with the next two films. But also I feel like there's a couple of things in it that rewatching it this time around, I did feel. I will say I am a bit of a fan of the not super high tech aspects of the previous Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
The boat scene in particular, I've always been a little frustrated by.
I was going to bring that up in my wrap up as well, that we hadn't talked about it.
Like the way that he's like pseudo Iron Man Spider-Man.
Yeah.
In some parts of this movie, I'm not a fan of. I do like Peter being the person who figures out what he needs to do to solve the problem. Yeah. And it, instead of it being like you got 299 right and you missed one. Burr, burr, burr. Like, I hate that beat. I hate those moments.
Oh, I like that beat. I'll talk about it in a minute.
Oh, that's fair. I don't like. I prefer a more natural like struggle, I guess, in a lot of ways.
Sure.
To not having something so advanced like that. That being said, I do enjoy the like lethal mode engaged.
Mm-hmm.
I love those moments with the technology. I think are fun. Mm-hmm. It's that's where I think, and then I think the really great moments for Peter as Spider-Man get to shine is when he is back in his old suit, and it is a bit more low tech. I do like that, and I also think that this will bleed into kind of my opinion of the next film about the levels of technology and how they bring a focus to that in the next movie that I think I actually really enjoy. But that being said, it is an A minus for me.
Yeah. It's an A for me. A pretty easy A. And I was going to say, to kind of what was already been touched on. I obviously the boat scene very much obviously trying to evoke and very much pulling similar imagery from the train of Spider-Man 2. But it's also, I would say, even before the train in Spider-Man 2, that imagery of Spider-Man holding on to like two things as hard as he can to try and help people is just kind of like inherent to the character. I really like it in the context of this film. In terms
like the boat scene?
Huh? I like the boat scene. Yeah. I really like the boat scene in this. It's very much obviously like it comes with that caveat of like, yes, I get that they're very much trying to like have their cake and eat it too from the other stuff. But why I like it so much is it is very much like the scene as a whole is a learning experience for him and is a lesson that he needs to learn. And I guess is the lesson that he needs to learn in this movie of like, he goes in there thinking he can save the day, but it turns out the messages that he left, like Tony handed it to the right people, and so the FBI were there. They were ready to like crack the deal. They were ready to do what he showed up to do, and he just didn't trust that like other people were handling that. Now, admittedly, yeah, if a little bit of communication from Tony Stark had been like, "Hey, no problem, I'm gonna sick the FBI on it. Thanks for the heads up. Should be good to go. Don't worry about it."
Good
Like,
job doing what you're supposed
yeah.
to be doing, Peter.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
That was a good catch. That easily could have, helped eliminate even the need for this scene. But I appreciate that things go awry. The machine, the sci-fi gun splits the thing in two, and he immediately goes into, okay, how do I fix this? What do I do? Obviously, boat in the middle of nowhere. Most of his tricks aren't, he can't get by. He can't like swing people off. He can't help that out. So it like the only option becomes trying to hold this thing together. He's got the tech, so he can do that. And I love the like reassurance that Karen gives of like 98% success rate. Congratulations, Peter. But obviously it needed to be 100%. So I love that like he almost does it, but still fails. And I love that he holds it together long enough for Tony's suit and all of the jets to get there to help save the day and do what needs to be done, and also take all the credit for it. Like,
Yeah.
everybody's like, yeah, Spider-Man, and then it still splits, and people are like, Spider-Man didn't help us, crap. And yeah, Tony Stark, yeah, Iron Man, you're saving the day, you get the credit. I love that because it is like it's the humbling lesson that he needs in that moment.
Yeah, for sure.
But he never stopped trying. Like he and it's a thing like as it was coming up, and I was like, oh, I need to bring that up too. Like, I very much like that it's that it is Tony comes and saves the day, and not the ship sinks and people, fall into the water, and do they drown or not? Because like that's a very different movie. Like, Peter needs to fail, but
Not that bad.
if people die from his failure,
That's way worse.
that's going to be something he can't bounce back from.
Yeah.
In this moment.
That's hanging up the
so-
mask.
So he gets the tough love speech from Tony of like, but if people had died, could you live with that? And if you had died, I have to live with that. I have to make that call, and I wanted you to be better. And so I really like that scene and kind of the aftermath.
I like that
that
scene.
goes on.
I don't care for the boat sequence of trying to keep it together and then like 98% complete. Like, that's the part and I know you said you like that.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
the part I don't like. Outside of that, I love the Tony Stark giving that hard love. If that's not who you are, like if like who you are
if you're
with
nothing without the suit, you don't
deserve to wear it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to derail,
No, you're fine.
derail like too much.
You're
but
fine. We've still
We're
got a
2
few more
hours in.
bits. We've still got a few more bits we can do. I'll have
but
one
I
more thing,
think-
but yeah, feel free to give your kind of counterpoint.
It doesn't work for me, and I think part of that is precisely because I think is
It's so tech
evoking
heavy.
so much
Oh,
of
okay.
Spider-Man 2, right? It is so, I think, deliberately kind of trying to evoke Spider-Man 2 imagery. And I think the difference is that where those two events are happening in the respective films and in those respective stories, right? Whereas, that sequence in Spider-Man 2 is basically right after he finally becomes Spider-Man again, right? And it's him sort of having just made the decision to like be this bigger thing than just what his own needs are. And he basically like sacrifices himself to stop the train. And then obviously his mask gets taken off, and like he's kind of gets the validation that Spider-Man does mean something to these people, right? And they're willing to protect him in the same way that they protect him. And it's one that I think seeps with sort of emotion and like what Spider-Man is, like the very core of that character and what he represents, right? Yeah. And it's just like a beautiful scene, right?
Yeah. And obviously this one is not trying to hit that kind of narrative,
right? And that's totally okay. But I think it is sort of like a culmination of a lot of my least favorite things in this movie all coinciding at once, right? Which is like, I actually don't hate the tech as much. I feel like I keep getting ascribed to hate the tech, but like it is a very techie moment. It's him, not even techie, but it is just straight up him being Iron Man in that moment, right? With like what he's trying to do. Obviously, the Iron Man stuff happens. I think weirdly enough, I would have almost liked, and the issue is that I almost would have liked this moment at like the end of the movie, sort of like the train sequence is in Spider-Man 2, but then we're obviously getting a very different film. But maybe if it had been something like Vulture had done that happens, Tony takes the suit away, and then like Spider-Man and Vulture have like one final competition afterwards, like that could have worked better for me, like more of a like build up to that sequence. But I think just like pacing wise, it happens in a more kind of rushed place because it's so early in the movie compared to the one. I like Tony's speech with Peter. That is probably the element of that sequence that works the most for me. But I think the boat scene itself doesn't work. I don't like the Iron Man rescue thing. It's weird because like I don't necessarily want the people to die, but it sort of feels like there's an element of like having your cake and eating it too, in the sense of like you need Peter to fail, but he can't fail, so you have to have like something come in and rescue it, right? In a way where I think an element of the train sequence that is kind of cool is that Peter succeeds, but also he very much fails in the train sequence, right? Like he stops the train from going off the rails, but then he just gets his fucking ass kicked instantly and immediately gets taken away. And Doc Ock could have done whatever he wanted to those people, right? Like he does lose. And I think that is kind of a, like, in any super movie, kind of an unheard of thing. Just like so unambiguously lose is sort of a cool decision. And you just can't have a boat full of people die. You just can't have a boat full of people die, right? So like it's sort of the just reality of the situation. But having said all of the stuff I don't like about it, I will circle back and say that I think the actual scene with RDJ and Pete is great. And again, it goes back to, despite that being a scene with him in his Iron Man outfit, it is pure Tony, right? It is pure Tony Stark. And I think, again, one thing that I was surprised about that you also did, Trevor, is like how not MCU this movie feels at times. And I think that really comes true with how RDJ acts in a lot of these scenes. And this one in particular, which is arguably the most Iron Man of all of his appearances. And it's also one that is maybe the most human to human scene. And especially, again, the debated opinion on whether or not Iron Man is still good after Iron Man 3, and my opinions on that have been established. But like, this is a rare moment, I think, of like, that feels authentic to Iron Man 3 Tony, right? And like that kind of character and how concerned he is and how he has a million things happen and how he is a busy dude, right? Like Tony is not going to tell this kid, okay, I've got it, I'm going to send the police into that, because that's not who Tony is. Like, that's just not who that character really is. He doesn't think in that way, right? In the same way that, probably the closest DC parallel to Tony is Batman, right? And Batman's not going to fucking tell Dick Grayson, cool, I got the cops on that, right? Like, that's just not how these characters operate, right? Like, they billionaire philanthropist superheroes are on a whole other wavelength, right? Because they do have a million things happen if they're keeping their eye on at once, right? And I think it's cool because you sort of see the pressure that he's under in that moment too. And in addition to that, having to shepherd this kid who he does view as kind of the best of him, just like Batman would for like any of the Robins, right? Who very much thinks are better than he is. And kind of the classic, like, I'm not mad, I'm disappointed parent line, right? Like, that works so well. And in some ways is this movie's like backdoor way to try to get into, with great power comes great responsibility, Uncle Ben connection, and it works really well. Which is in some ways is sort of why when we get to No Way Home, it's sort of a second version of this, obviously very different, but like we sort of had our great power, great responsibility moment right here, and it really works. And so that's what I don't like about it, and also what I say I would like about it.
Yeah, the last little thing I was going to add was, and admittedly, this was like probably my fourth or fifth time watching the movie, and the first time I really caught it. But I do love that in that sequence when he is, it's not just okay, show me all like the structural points and I'll web everything together. It is and like it goes by so quickly and like there's so much other stuff going on that's very easy to miss, hence why I missed it so many times. But I did catch this time that like it's not just he's webbing all those points, it's he's using all of the gadgets, all of the tools at his disposal. He's saying web grenade, electric whip, like he's using all of the tools that Karen has given them. He's trying to find like the right one for the right spots and kind of stuff, and he just ultimately misses a couple in the madness of trying to hold a boat together as you would. So yeah, I like it, and I think it serves the purpose that it's in this movie to serve very effectively, while also being like a spectacle action set piece kind of thing.
I think one thing that's important to remember too, and I feel like we say this a lot whenever we talk about anything involving Spider-Man, because we all have lots of opinions on that, as does literally the entire universe. But like, it's also like okay to just like disagree about something, right? And like we're also ultimately all saying this movie's good. It's really good. It's a matter of how good, right? And how much it lands for us. And also like I think Spider-Man is a character, I know it is in fact, that we all have a like real attachment to, right? Which I think speaks again back to my other point of like how much he is anything and everything for whoever you might be. You can view Spider-Man in yourself, right? And I think that's again part of the greatness of it. And unlike Star Wars, where everyone gets their own trilogy, pretty much all three versions of Spider-Man are at least pretty good, if not excellent, right? And so
a couple more things to rank here. Let's dive into the Sinister Six.
This is gonna be the good one.
Currently we're sitting at 10 villains. Our number 10, Rhino. Number 9, Venom.
I forgot we'd done 5. You guys.
Number 8, Sandman. Number 7, Amazing Green Goblin. Number 6, Electro. Number 5, Bully Maguire. Number 4, Lizard. Number 3, New Goblin, aka that was James Franco. Number 2, Green Goblin, and number 1, Doc Ock. Where do we want to throw the Vulture into this mix?
I think he's a solid number.
I would say 3. Oh,
I really love Vulture.
I like
really
Vulture a lot too. But I would say 3. I think personally.
I would personally put him at number 1. So I think that'll we'll split the difference there at number. I mean, I think Michael Keaton is phenomenal. Yes,
I agree too. But like,
and as much as so, like he has like all of the menace of Green Goblin without having to do like I'm crazy. And Willem Dafoe's great. And again, Willem Dafoe will also get like
I'm crazy.
Willem Dafoe gets a shot when we eventually get a No Way Home to move up the list maybe again.
You have no idea. That's what I already had prepared for.
Same for Alfred Molina.
Yeah, that's true. Alfred Molina too.
Be prepared. The strike back that'll happen in from Far From No Way Home. Will come sudden and strong.
I mean, yeah, but whereas like, hey, if we did do Morbius, that would drop Vulture down a significant peg for how dumb that character is in the post-credit scene of that movie. So,
have either one of you seen Morbius?
No. But I've heard and I've read about.
it. I don't know anything about Morbius other than the fact that he in fact does not say it's Morbin time. But that's it. That and everybody on the internet convinced Sony to put it back in the theaters and just to mess with them. Yeah,
that's exactly what I was going to say. Is like that's one of the all-time greatest internet trolls I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. So Vulture. So it sounds like we're splitting the difference then, putting him at number 2.
Because Cameron would have him 2, I would have him 3, you'd have him 1. So I guess that works out as 2.
Yeah. And that's. I mean, like all 3 of these are god tier.
Oh yeah,
certainly,
absolutely,
certainly among like superhero villains too, because so many are bad, especially in the MCU.
And I think for me, going back to like why I put it all the way up at number 1 is, as you kind of even touched on, like in Spider-Man 2, Doc Ock is kind of off doing his own thing. And a lot of the movie is Spider-Man having an existential crisis of, do I want to be Spider-Man anymore? So like the actual Doc Ockness is a little bit more minimal than we get here with the Vulture stuff. And like the Vulture is like as given by how shocking of a reveal it was when we find out Vulture is also Liz's dad. Like that twist alone is like, oh, they did such a great job of framing his entire arc to that point, and in a way that still works if you like go back and watch it with that knowledge of like the things he reacts to when he's seeing a news report on the screen. He's reacting because his daughter is, you know, just got saved by Spider-Man or something like that. But it also works as like, oh, he's seeing that threat Spider-Man that's a, you know, a thorn in his side and stuff. And so I think like his arc works so well separate from Peter for the movie as well. In a way that just is phenomenal stuff. And yeah, it's Michael freaking Keaton.
Spider-Man 2 is so good. Just the existential crisis. Come
on. So rank our cameos. Obviously, no Bruce Campbell stuff ever here anymore, unless we want to throw and rank him in for Multiverse of Madness eventually. But we do get our final Stan Lee cameo. So where do we want to throw him in the mix here as Gary? We had number 5 is graduation guest from Amazing Spider-Man 2. Number 4, Man in Fair, which is going to be Spider-Man 1. Yeah, Spider-Man 1. Man dodging debris. Man in Times Square and School Librarian.
Times Square one and School Librarian ones are good.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's definitely not the School Librarian. I think that's going to be the.
Or even Man in the Times Square one is like a sort of
Man in Times Square, like he delivers the line.
Yeah. So I would say I feel like
Man in Fair. Actually, I'm realizing Man in Fair is going to be Spider-Man 3, because Man dodging debris is like the first one. He helps somebody, you know, dodge debris from the World Fair when Macy Gray's singing and Green Goblin's blowing stuff up. So
I would maybe say this is 5.
I can get behind that. That's fine. I mean, yeah, he certainly has more lines in this one than in a lot of his other ones, but I think his other ones, especially the ones where he's like being an everyday hero himself of helping people.
And it's also just like, especially for like Spider-Man 1, just like that first pop of like, that's Stan Lee, right? Like, it's just like a cool, like time capsule.
Yep. All right. Time for the big one, our Spider-Man ranking. So where are we going to put Spider-Man Homecoming? We have at number 5, Spider-Man 3. Number 4, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Number 3, The Amazing Spider-Man. Number 2, Spider-Man. And number 1, Spider-Man 2. Which is not at all confusing if you're just listening along and not looking at this document. So where do we want to throw Spider-Man Homecoming into the mix? I mean, I'll cede it to you guys because I don't think either of you are going to rank this as high. But yeah, this would be my number 1, even above Spider-Man 2.
This is my.
I think Spider-Man 2 has maybe some more iconic moments, but I like the whole of this one more than I like Spider-Man 2, especially given how much I hated some of the very specific choices of Spider-Man 2.
Yeah, for me, it is number 2. So
I would have it, and just like with the villains, I'd probably have it 3.
Number 3. All right. You know what? I'll give it to you on this side, Logan. So we'll throw it in there at number 3 behind Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man.
But again, just as Trevor noted a second ago, crucially, the gap between 3 and 4 is massive. It is the top 3, and 4, 5, and 6 is really quite significant of a gap.
All right. Our extra credit, other suggestions, if you like this, Disney Plus is going to throw at you, sadly, Secret Invasion. Then they're also going to give you Spider-Man Far From Home, Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity War, and Avengers Endgame, and then The Amazing Spider-Man 2, The Amazing Spider-Man, and Spider-Man 3, where they're just kind of working back movies in time chronologically. Instead of those latter 3, I would say, Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 2. And hop off Disney Plus and go watch Spider-Man No Way Home. That's
or Spider-Verse.
Or realistically, go watch the Spider-Verse movies. Extracurriculars, anybody watching anything else on Disney Plus? I imagine no, but I always throw it out there, see if anybody else.
I don't think so.
Cam, anything?
Not right now, but probably soon.
Cool. I will say I did hop into because I'm this kind of nerdy. They have released a new and are releasing a second season of Behind the Attraction on Disney Plus, which is a they had the Imagineering story was like their big launch Disney Plus documentaries, like 10-part series on Disney parks and Imagineering and all that stuff. And then Behind the Attraction is very much the toys that made us and the movies that made us team, that kind of vein of documentary. They did a 12 episode run of season 1, touching on different attractions, and they've got 6 episodes so far in season 2. I was right before we sat down to record, I was watching the first episode, which is on Pirates of the Caribbean. Episode 3 is on the Indiana Jones ride, so if you want to go check that,
Logan,
that's out there for you.
That's exciting.
So yeah,
I might do that.
Good fun behind the attraction stuff. It was my
You
go-to.
said how long are they?
How
long are they?
They're 30 to 45 minutes usually.
Oh yeah, easy. Okay.
Yeah. And it's very much like there's no real through line of them. So yeah, go and watch the ones you want to watch, basically.
Yeah.
Okay,
cool.
I very much would use those as like the placeholder episodes when I would do my Disney trips. So
yeah,
like I we've got 4 episodes on Behind the Attraction already on that D Plus show. If you want to go,
maybe we'll do an indie one at some point
in the past. So yeah, typically I would do it in like blocks of 3. So but if you want to just talk about the indie one, we could absolutely do that as well. But yeah, so that's the other thing I've been watching on Disney Plus. In addition to obviously Loki, which wrapped up last week. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me to talk pretty much as long as the movie, a little bit longer, here on Spider-Man Homecoming. You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie, Logggy. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Logan?
Trevor is playing Baldur's Gate 3, I believe.
Yep.
Still
finishing that up.
And that will take a long time. So you should go watch that.
Probably got another 10-ish episodes from where.
How many are you in right now?
I think this episode was like episode 27. I don't have the
it's gonna be one of the longer.
Like
it's gonna be one of the longer ones at this point. So
yeah, indeed.
Because Cam, how long was your Dying Light 2 one? That was like 25, 30?
No, it was 34 episodes.
34 episodes.
Mm-hmm. Was that longer or shorter than Jedi Fallen Order?
It was longer than Jedi Fallen Order. Yeah. Skyrim ended up running longer.
Oh right.
And if you combine Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, they're probably in the ballpark of 30, 40 episodes, something like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Baldur's Gate, I imagine, will end up the longest length.
You should go watch that, because that's so much time and effort's gone into that. And it's going to be this monumental work by Trev. So that's what I'd say.
It's definitely been a fun labor of love on that one.
I think in general, I'll say, to take back my shout out, because I can.
Sure.
Okay. A shout out in general to Trevor and Cam for just doing mammoth projects that are very long and are a lot of work, and it's incredible everything that they're doing on that side of everything.
I'll fully admit it's mostly Trevor.
Oh yeah,
you did multiple long ones too, so you absolutely get the shout out and credit.
Wait, was Dying Light? No, Dying Light 2 was last year, right?
Dying Light 2 was last year. Jedi Fallen Order was this year.
That one was fun.
It was very, and we all, I mean, you and I together did a lot of Elden Ring stuff before we finally said fuck off to that game.
Yeah, I have it installed on my PS5, and each time I look at it, I'm like, maybe we'll come around to it. I was like, I don't think we'll ever come around to it.
I finally uninstalled it. I was
did you?
Never
Okay.
again. Never again.
The
fire giant beat us.
Yeah.
What was that, Logan?
No, it's fine.
Yeah. We've talked about maybe you and I sit down and do like Super Mario Wonder, some co-op stuff. Or I still want to do ones.
I still think it'd be cool if me and Trev did like we did for when Trev went through Hitman, to go through like Hitman and like for me to like play your custom like levels. Yeah, I think it'd be like a cool idea.
That'd definitely be a thing. I'd have to go back and like relearn how to play Hitman after a few years. So at this point, it's much more like when their eventual Bond game comes out,
It's
you
crazy.
drive that one and I watch, and you can do all your deep cut. Like here's what this is a reference to.
I replayed all of Hitman 1 and 2 earlier this year, and it's surprising how quickly those games come back to you.
Oh, yeah,
like you definitely like eat shit for for a second, and then you sort of like get your sea legs back, and it's you're off and running again.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, you can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot, 2B's, 2T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, I want to give a massive shout out to last week's that Nerdy Site show. We did a deep dive into talking about the Marvels, and kind of talking about like which is the most recent MCU film that has come out. And we had a lot
to come out already. That's how you know I'm so busy right now that news had come out yet.
It came out. We had a lot to say about it, and I think even it's funny because we talked a lot about like the things we didn't like about the movie, but we both really enjoyed the movie.
Yeah.
So it was a very fun kind of like breakdown of like what we really thought about it and kind of like where the MCU is at as a whole, and kind of like the reality of like where superhero movies are at as a whole as well.
I might watch that this weekend.
We have a really great conversation about that. So that's my shout out.
Yeah, I will say, especially knowing how much you loved the Miss Marvel series,
Miss Marvel. Yeah,
Logan. I'll say, the movie very much feels like three parts of a movie combined, like Frankenstein together. Yeah. Like it's partly a Captain Marvel 2. Yeah. It's partly a Miss Marvel's sequel. And then it's partly a trio team up because Monica Rambeau's character doesn't even really get like a full, like she didn't get like a full kind of precursor to this, apart from like a few episodes of WandaVision. So it's very much like trying to take those three threads. I will say Miss Marvel probably gets the best of the best like sides of that, in that i.e. like most of her family comes along for the ride, and so like we get to see a lot of them kind of interacting with everything versus like other figures from the other characters' stories. So like Miss Marvel comes out the best of everything, but it's also a like if you go in kind of expecting it to be a bit messy, you'll probably come out appreciating it more than if you're going and expecting like a solid time. It's like it's messy, but especially Miss Marvel stuff is really good in it. So yeah, if you do check it out, I'll be curious your thoughts. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. In addition to all the shout outs of the Baldur's Gate Let's Plays that I've been doing, which have just been a ton of fun, as I've also just started a fifth run on my own. Just because it's the game of my heart this year. But yeah, all that's been a ton of fun. I'm also going to maybe try and sit down this weekend and do a Super Mario RPG Let's Play. We'll see if I find some time to do that, because that's certainly a game of my childhood that I was a dear fan of. If you want some Spider-Man stuff, I did do my first hour of Spider-Man 2, so you can go check that out. And if you want more Spider-Man stuff, Cam and I did a deep dive spoiler cast on Marvel's Spider-Man 2, the video game. So if you're feeling super Spider-Man-y, that's out there for you as well. Enjoy. We'll be back next week with Spider-Man Far From Home as a nice little post-Thanksgiving treat for our American audience, and just a normal Friday thing for our international crowds. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please remember to like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, ring notification bells, all of those fun things. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, class dismissed, and thwip thwip.